started, so when you see it rolling, we'll pause before I open the meeting officially, so. What? Yeah. If everybody would silence your cell phones. Welcome to the June 14th, 2021 Historic Zoning Commission. I'd like to call the meeting to order. And our first order of business tonight will be to entertain a motion to approve the May 10th, 2021 minutes. Is there such a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Ken. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Kathy. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And the chair's going to abstain since he was not here last month. Okay, announcements. Amanda?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I did want to take a moment to introduce our newest planner. We have with us Victoria Hensley, and I'll let her speak just a moment.
Hi, everyone. Yes, this is my second week and first HCC meeting, so I'm very excited to be joining y'all. I am a fourth-year PhD student at MTSU. I actually had to think about that for a moment, but I'm very excited to be with the city and to be working with all of y'all.
Welcome.
We do have a couple of design review committee items that I want to bring to your attention. So we'll have our regularly scheduled meeting on Monday, June 21st at 4 p.m., so it's a week from today, here in the boardroom. But we also have a special site visit that has been scheduled for the park at Harlansdale Farm. That'll be at 2:30 that day. So we'll have that meeting at 2:30, and then we will adjourn and come back here in time to start this meeting. We will be on site. We'll meet at the main barn at Harlansdale. We will have representatives from the City Parks Department as well as Friends of Franklin Parks to talk about some capital improvement projects that are moving forward with that area. So we're very excited about that. I also wanted to remind you that I did email you all. We have received a special site visit request for a property on Franklin Road. I hope you all received that message. I did inform the applicant that we cannot accommodate a Monday site visit because we already have one scheduled, but we are looking at either Tuesday afternoon or Wednesday afternoon, the 22nd and 23rd. So if you could please respond to me sometime either right now or tonight and let me know if you can accommodate one of those. I'd greatly appreciate it because I do need to notice that in the paper and send that in tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. All right, non-agenda items. The non-agenda process by design is reserved for emergency instances. Non-agenda items shall be considered only upon the unanimous approval of all historic zoning members. Are there any items to be placed on for non-agenda items on our agenda? Hearing none, are there citizen comments now for items not on the agenda? This is open for Franklin citizens to be heard on items not included on this agenda. As provided by law, the Historic Zoning Commission shall make no decisions or consideration of action on citizen comments except to refer the matter to the planning director for administrative consideration or to schedule the matter for historic zoning consideration at a later date. Are there any citizens that wish to comment on items not on the agenda? Okay, we are ready then for our first item. This is consideration of preliminary historic zoning recommendation request for potential development at southeast and southwest corners of the intersection of Mack Hatcher Parkway and Franklin Road. Kaiser Vokran Design applicant. Amanda?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Before I jump into this specific application, I did want to give you a little bit of information on the request generally. So this is a fairly new process that was codified in our December 2019 version of the zoning ordinance. This is a process by which we request that an applicant proposing a development or site plan within the historic preservation overlay ask the Historic Zoning Commission for a recommendation to move forward with Planning Commission or BOMA as related to how the development conceptually, because right now all you have is the conceptual, it's not been vetted by the city in any other respect at this time formally, but how that conceptual plan would either allow the Historic Zoning Commission to utilize its guidelines or not. And specifically, the Historic Zoning Commission is being asked to look at things that development plan entitlements would define for a plan, if so approved. That would be the lot sizes, the lot configurations, and what I mean by configurations is the physical shape of the lot is created, because a shape of a lot creates a building form, and building form is very much what the Historic Zoning Commission considers in its guidelines on a routine basis. We're also looking at setbacks, whether it's setbacks from the front of the property line back to where the building is, or between buildings, or even the rear, as that would be applicable. And in this case specifically, it's not as much, but the front and the side setbacks. We're also looking at context as related to the type of building form. So how would it relate to the context of the area in which it's proposed to be situated? Does anyone have any questions about that request? And what the role of the commission is for a recommendation this evening?
Everybody good?
All right.
Okay.
Okay, so to specifically speak to item number 1, a potential development is being proposed at the southeast and southwest corners of the intersection at Mack Hatcher Parkway that you see on the screen here at the top and Franklin Road. So everything south of Mack Hatcher that fronts Franklin Road down to the river is within the historic preservation overlay. The southeast corner includes the Creekside property, which is on the National Register of Historic Places. And then the west side of the property includes the Daniel McMahon house. It's not within the area that the applicant's proposing to develop, but it's adjacent to it on the property next door. So just briefly, the context of Franklin Road is along Franklin Road between this north bank of the river and Mack Hatcher Parkway. Included are several historic properties that are listed on the National Register. That includes Jasmine Grove and Miles Manor, Wyatt Hall, just south of here, Riverview, Truett House, Creekside, Roper's Knob, The Factory, Harlansdale Farm. All of those are very significant historic properties that have been listed on the National Register. Construction dates of those properties vary greatly between the early 1800s to about the 1950s, and the properties represent an array of architectural designs. So the northern portion of this corridor is included within the city's scenic corridor overlay for its rural view sheds. And that is characterized by rural, residential, and agricultural buildings. It's included within that overlay to help preserve that natural beauty of its view shed and to maintain that rural gateway into downtown Franklin. The guidelines would recommend that the significant landscape continue to project that open rural appearance. I'm going to skip down to front yard setbacks. The proposed development plan, give me just a moment. I'm going to go ahead and skip here. So here's the development plan. The proposed development plan includes 34 houses and 33 multiplex buildings, or quote-unquote big house buildings, both on the west side and the east side of Franklin Road. The houses are proposed to be set back 150 feet to accommodate the scenic corridor overlay that I mentioned, and serve as buildings that the single family serve as buildings that line in front of the multiplex buildings. So the single families here in yellow, and then the big house or multiplex buildings are in the more orange color. So as defined in our zoning ordinance, just to be clear to everyone here, a multiplex building is a building that's designed to appear as a larger single-family home, but could have up to 4 units in it. The conceptual plan here demonstrates an open space in that 150 feet. And the way that the zoning ordinance reads, every lot has to have a frontage. And I think that that's the intent of the applicant here, is that these buildings front on the Franklin Road. So these lot lines are actually not accurate. I'll ask Mr. Vogren to speak to that, but I think the intent, as explained to staff, is that these lots would actually front Franklin Road, but they would be undevelopable in the first 150 feet due to the scenic corridor overlay presence. As for lot sizes and configurations, those are very important considerations at this point in the review process. As I mentioned, these are parameters that dictate the building form and therefore determine if these applicable design guidelines that the commission reviews can be met, particularly as related to placement of buildings, their massing, and the lot coverage on the site. Side yard setbacks are also an important facet of this review, as they determine the potential building envelope for each of those lots and affect how closely the buildings are situated to one another. These are critical setbacks that play a significant role in maintaining the open rural appearance of this important gateway into downtown. Now, for the single-family homes in particular, they are proposed to measure anywhere between 40 feet wide to 70 feet wide. The applicants modified the proposal since the last design review committee meeting to expand lots previously proposed at 65 feet to 70 feet in width, and it's concentrated, some of the narrower lots into areas that the applicant believes to offer less visibility from Franklin Road. And then widening the ones that the applicant believes would have more visibility from Franklin Road. Now, analysis of this historic corridor demonstrates that the smallest lot widths are that front Franklin Road are around Hooper Lane, which is near Harlansdale Farm, that measure between 55 and 65 feet and feature a much smaller vernacular style home. That's in Exhibit 1 of your report. As such, the largest proposed lot width is only 5 feet wider than the largest that you see as an existing historic lot on Franklin Road. And it's only 15 feet wider than the narrowest infill lot. There is an infill lot near Old Liberty Pike that it measures a little narrower, and that is, I believe, in your exhibit number 2. The lots closest to downtown along the corridor appear to measure 55 to 70 feet. I believe 55 was the infill lot, 70 feet closer to there. Now, the spacing between buildings is also important. The applicant's proposing to utilize 5-foot side yard setbacks, so that would be 10 feet of space between each single-family building for the lots that measure 40 to 50 feet wide. 7.5 to 10 feet side yard setbacks for the 60 to 70 foot wide, which would be anywhere between 15 and 20 feet between those buildings, and then 10-foot side yard setbacks for the corner lots. This means that if the entire building envelope is used for each lot, it would give the spacing I just mentioned. The proposed side yard setbacks create a streetscape that's a little less rural in character than you see on Franklin Road. For reference, the closest set buildings along Franklin Road appear to be located at what I've identified as 206 and 210 Franklin Road. And those buildings are spaced about 25 feet apart. You can see that in Exhibit 3. The larger residences on the corridor feature much more substantial spacing between buildings. Those, for example, you could look at 351 Franklin Road and 103 Harlansdale Court. Those are 2 buildings right there at the intersection of Harlansdale Court or Harlansdale Manor and Franklin Road. Those buildings are the 2 just south of there on the left side. Those measure about 55 feet apart. So the proposed depth of the lot's also important. The configuration that's proposed by the applicant, and I'll just go ahead and scroll through here so you can see it. This is the single-family typical configuration shown here. The single-family lots would range between 108 to 120 feet deep. This configuration creates a form that's not indicative of those located along Franklin Road. It's very deep lots. For reference, the width of the house located at Harlansdale Court and Franklin Road that you see just south of that intersection is has a mass that's pretty substantial there, and it's about 55 feet wide. No, I'm sorry, 68 feet wide. And the depth of the homes at Splendor Ridge subdivision, which the commission has been considering most recently behind the Riverview subdivision, or Riverview historic home, range from 78 to 89 feet in depth. So this is a pretty substantially deep building and a narrower frontage. As for building mass, the concept plan features many locations for building massing is significantly smaller in footage than that of the lot depth, as I just described, thus producing building forms that are more suburban in character and less appropriate to the Franklin Road historic context. If concentrated closely together, you would not necessarily experience the depths of the buildings, but the side yard setbacks and spacing are also not appropriate to the context of the Franklin Road Historic District. The renderings presented by the applicant are here. This is for single family. They indicate a desire to use brick and siding, which is appropriate. The scale at two stories is appropriate to the context, but the proposed building depths are not in keeping with that established rural context. Then moving on quickly to the multiplex. Here's the multiplex form as proposed. Although undefined, the width of the proposed multiplex buildings appears to be more appropriate to the context of the district. The wider mass is appropriate in relation to several of the larger historic residences nearby. And the aspirational photos here are from Harlansdale Manor subdivision, which is just south of this property on the left side as you're driving north. These farmhouse-inspired dwellings feature appropriate massing and scale and serve as an excellent architectural example for future infill. The renderings provided by the applicant, however, do not appear to be similar to the massing and architectural variety of the existing buildings along the corridor, and the guidelines would recommend that building size in that rural landscape around the Harlansdale farm be limited to 1 to 2 stories. And you can see on the elevations here, this appears to be 2 to 2.5 stories. Further, the multiplex renderings demonstrate the use of what appears to be multiple entrances on the front elevation. His zoning ordinance would require that multiplex buildings, like I said, appear to be single-family residences with one prominent entrance on the front to reinforce the intent of the building as reading as one large single-family building as opposed to a multiple-unit building. A minimum of 15 feet is proposed between each of these buildings, with no average or maximum defined. As mentioned previously, his larger historic and existing residences on the corridor feature much more substantial side yard setbacks than those specified by the applicant here. On the proposed footprint of each unit, about 4,000 to 4,500 square feet without the garage, is larger than typical in this district, but may be appropriate given their placement behind the single-family residences. So I'm going to go back here. So you can see the single family will be here, the multiplex behind. It should be noted that, Envision Franklin does support the use of multiplex units at this property. And it should also be noted that the footprints of the aspirational Harlansdale Manor photos that the applicant provided are approximately 5,000 square feet, and one of them is 4,100 square feet. So that's generally in line with the size of the Harlansdale homes as far as footprint goes. The scale is a little higher than what is recommended by the guidelines, but the single-family configuration is not necessarily going to allow the Historic Zoning Commission to apply guidelines that will produce something context-sensitive to this corridor.
Would you say that again?
The single-family residences, as proposed
Okay.
lot sizes, are not necessarily conducive to allowing the Historic Zoning Commission to use its guidelines effectively. So it would be recommended that the Historic Zoning Commission provide a recommendation of disapproval to the Planning Commission and the Board of Mayor and Aldermen with the following considerations. That, these development entitlements, such as building setbacks, building scale, and lot sizes and configurations, will affect the ability of the Historic Zoning Commission to utilize its guidelines as recommended to ensure contextual, sensitive infill development. The building forms created by the lots proposed this evening are not consistent with the historic or infill buildings located along the Franklin Road corridor, and then therefore not supported by the guidelines. That side yard setbacks play a significant role in maintaining the open rural space of this important gateway into downtown. The proposal to utilize shallow side yard setbacks between the bulk of the buildings is incongruent with the recommendations of the guidelines to provide an uncongested gateway into the downtown and emphasizes the community's historic character. The use of larger lots with more significant side yard setbacks would be more contextually appropriate to the rural historic corridor. Additionally, the use of interspersed lot sizes, particularly those for the single-family homes, would appear more organic and more appropriate to the rural context. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Gary, you'd like to comment?
Sure.
I'm sure.
Thank you, Amanda. Good evening, everybody. Great to see everybody in person for once. It's nice to get out and see people. It's my second meeting, I think.
It's odd for us to be in here, too.
It is, but thank you. I'm Gary Vogren with Kaiser Vogren Design. I'm a land planner, landscape architect here in town. Been here a long time, work with a lot of the city staff here, a lot of familiar faces out here. This project is not an easy one. We all know that. It's a great site, location, beautiful location. We love our city. Our firm lives and works here, so we take a lot of experience in what we do on a project like this. So we appreciate your time looking at this. The last time I came before you was, I guess, in April. Been a while, at the DRC, and we heard, okay, the design needs to loosen up the lots along Franklin Road, provide more variety of setbacks along Franklin Road, maintain that rural character. Architecture obviously is something that would have to get reviewed by this board no matter what happens. If it goes, every building has to be reviewed by this board along Franklin Road, given the HPO. I think that's right, Amanda, correct? Yes. So there's a lot of thought that goes into it. These are character images and plans we've showed, but wanted to talk to you about, when we first came to you, I heard those comments, so we reduced the number of lots along Franklin Road. So we dropped those number of lots. I think we lost 2 on the left side, western side, lost 1 on the eastern side. At the time I shared the plan, those lots were probably predominantly 40 to 50 feet wide, with maybe a couple 65s at the ends, at either end of the vegetation there, but we really wanted to make sure that we increased the lot sizes and really opened up the visual corridor as you come into the city of Franklin. We all drive down this street, Franklin Road, look east and west and see a beautiful field and crops. So knowing that we have the 150-foot setback there, which is very strong, that was put in there for a reason. Envision Franklin, rural character, all the above. So it's not only, it's both. Amanda's right. It's setbacks side, but the front is very strong. 150-foot setback. The fronts of these homes are about mid-block of the existing Creekside Manor. So that's always front and center. We know that. We want to pay respect to that. Providing trails within that 150-foot setback, vegetation, tree canopies, rural fencing, create that look. I provided some visual images. Amanda, if you could just show those real quick. No, just the vision images of, yeah, there you go. So really just, we want to create that front door character and corridor on Franklin Road. The black fencing, horse rail fencing, houses pushed back from the street, strong streetscape. As she mentioned, those lots will be touching Franklin Road. Every public lot has to touch Franklin Road. We drew it graphically on this plan because it gets confusing, all those lot lines shooting to the front. So, but all those lots will have to front Franklin Road and touch Franklin Road. So they have to be on a public frontage. But to allow that 150-foot setback is very strong. But these images kind of show that character of what we're trying to establish here, real character in the community. Knowing architecture needs to tie into Harlesdale Farm, Harlesdale Manor, City of Franklin. Creating amenities that are rural in character, outdoor events, community gardens. Those are things kind of outside of your purview, but those are just the elements we're trying to bring to this community. In addition to that, we've also wanted to create an open space corridor between this project. If you can go to the master plan, Amanda, real quick. Thank you. Yeah. Knowing where we are in Franklin Road, Mac Hatcher and Franklin Road, this intersection, we wanted to make sure we had housing that fronts the street. When I first met with the aldermen and planning commissioners, that was the one thing they wanted to see, was bring single-family front and center to the streets. Make sure they're looking onto Franklin Road, as opposed to the multiplexes. Again, widening up the lots from 70 feet to the main middle, but also preserving vegetation around the edges. If you look at this graphic, the darker trees, which I think you can kind of tell in the plan, those are the most distinguished trees in terms of what you see driving down Franklin Road. Preserving those trees and maintaining that character along Franklin Road. All the other trees that are lighter colored, that's all open space, which is great, which meets in Vision Franklin, the 50% requirement. But we want to make sure we preserve all the trees around the edges and to really showcase the larger lots within the center of the project, which are 70 feet, which is a very significant home, but also increasing the setbacks to 10 feet separation. In addition to the Creekside Manor, which is the heart of this development, is to give it a little TLC. It needs help. It's on the save the list. We're working with Jill Bergen. Mary Pierce is obviously very important to that too. We're going to meet with Jill and talk about what we're thinking about doing for that building to get it back to where it needs to be, for an event center, community center, active element of the community, but also creating that open space between this development and Harlesdale Manor. There's a great there's a great natural resource between this development to Harlesdale Manor that we want to preserve that shows all that green space there, connecting from one point to the other. I also shared some 3D images, Amanda. Could we share those? And I think that's all in your packets, I believe. Yeah, the 3D shots from Franklin Road. Oh, go to that one. That one right there, fine. That's fine. Now, what I wanted to show here was the top section is a cross-section from the midpoint of the site, kind of right down the middle where that little building is, kind of where the Mallory Valley Station building is. What I really wanted to show here was the difference between 150-foot setback off Franklin Road as to compared if you go down in front of Harlesdale Manor, the next section below, those homes are from 65 to 85 feet from the right-of-way. We are talking 150 feet from the right-of-way, so that's that scenic corridor we're all talking about. We want to preserve, we want to maintain that, really establish that character. But it really chokes down once you get past this development. Even when you go down in the Franklin, Hooper Lane, the homes along Franklin Road, all those are pushed up within 60 to 65 feet and even closer. So I wanted to show the difference between 150 on Franklin Road with a tree grove in the middle of it, a trail, enhance the landscape, really create that character. In addition to the 150, we're talking another 30 to 60 feet from the pavement. So we're looking at 180 to 240 feet from the front of a house from the pavement. The houses along Harlesdale Manor and some of the other ones Amanda mentioned are very close to those elements. So I just want to showcase that, just showing the breadth of that setback and what it really maintains to the city of Franklin as you come into town, creating that character.
So Gary, just to clarify, you're saying 150 feet to the property line?
Correct.
The right-of-way?
Yeah, so the right-of-way is 30 to 60 feet off the pavement, so it's 150 plus to the houses. And the same with, a little different than at Harlesdale Manor where it's, the right-of-way chokes down, but also the houses choke down, so it's a very tight section there. So just want to showcase that grand experience as you're driving down Franklin Road. The houses are pushed way back with 2 rows of trees, the fencing, the whole 9 yards I mentioned. Okay, so this, and I'm not sure how these showed in your packets, but what we really wanted to show was we dropped each house in 3D onto Google Earth just to see what we want it to look like, but also show the board what really this looks like to scale if you're driving eye level down Franklin Road. So this snapshot is you're driving down south towards town. looking left, as soon as you pass the trees, and that little arrow on the bottom shows where you are, that's kind of what you're looking at. You see a tree mass to the left that's preserved. The home sites are kind of tucked behind trees, the fencing, and you can see the separation between. And it ranges from 5 to 20, or 10 to 20 feet separation. So they kind of vary, and we wanted to create that varying setback between the houses, but knowing you've got 150 to 250 in front, that's a nice scenic corridor driving Franklin Road. Next image, Amanda. So we just kind of went down the street. This is now your mid-block, looking due left going south. You can see the big open space between those two. That's a common open space trail. It's probably almost 80 to 100 feet between house to house in the middle there, and then they kind of stagger apart between those. But you can see how far those are back from Franklin Road. Next slide, Amanda. So this one's just before you're going to Creekside Manor, the estate looking to your left, the house is off to your left, and then the trees to the right, just before you get to Creekside Manor. Yep, that's the existing vegetation at Creekside. It just shows the care. We just kind of ghosted in the homes there. Obviously, all the details on the elevations and future design. So, and we did the same thing on the other side. We just want to see what this looks like based on these home sizes, from 40 to 70 feet, and concentrating the smaller houses behind the trees, where we're saving trees and opening up the lots, where you're really a direct shot. And you're going 35, 40 mile an hour, but that setback is so grand in the open space, we just want to reinforce that. So all these slides kind of depict that character that we're trying to establish there. And if you think of a 70-foot wide home, and I should have brought some images of other projects, but a 70-foot home, that's very significant. We say 3,500 square feet, but you could probably get more on a lot like that in terms of its size. I kind of compare these to lots in West Haven down State Boulevard as you're going towards the main fountain, and you look left and right. Those are about 70-foot homes, and they're very grand. That's one of the main streets that Tim Downey did in West Haven when we master planned that as well. Yeah, I want to show a couple things, then I'll just address some of your comments, if that's all right, Amanda. Yeah, that'd be good. So the Gates of Carlisle is a project my firm designed in probably 98. Back in the day, off Highway 96 in Carlisle Lane, before West Haven was there, was the first development into the western gateway into the city of Franklin back in the day that we really wanted to preserve, working with Bob Martin, the planning director at the time. This is the Gates of Carlisle. This is about a 45-acre site on Highway 96, but what's unique to this is this project was designed with the intent to have 125 to 150-foot setbacks off of Highway 96. So that yellow zone along Highway 96, from the edge of pavement, well, that one's to the right-of-way, but to the right-of-way to the fronts of those houses, that's about the same or less closer than Franklin Road than we are here. So these are, the ones on Creekside are even further back than this. But it just shows what could be done within a 150-foot setback along Highway 96 in terms of vegetation. So this one kind of, that green in the middle is about 150 feet. So you can see the expansiveness of how wide that is. And you can think of that front row where that little pin mark is in yellow. That's Franklin Road. It's called Carlisle Lane there, but that's how far back these houses we're talking about in terms of Creekside. Next slide. So this is the view from 96, and this is closer than the houses on Creekside. This is probably about 125 feet. But the vegetation, the trees, if I can get the power lines out of there, I'd airbrush them out of there, but you can see how far back the houses are from that site. And they're about the same size as what we're talking about here. These are actually even smaller along Highway 96. These are like 45-foot wide houses. But in that project, we really want to showcase what you can do in a 150-foot setback and create that real character back even before Envision Franklin was even dreamed up. So I just want to show that. And wasn't sure if anybody had a chance to get out there and look at that, but that was kind of our intent. So, Amanda, if you don't mind, I'll just go through a couple of your comments just so I can address a couple, and I think that'll be it, and you can. So I'm just looking at her comments under historic resources. I'm looking at her report now, members, under context, and then historic resources. The first one mentions Chapter 18. And we're going with the naturalistic screening element. And she mentions that a minimum width of 75 feet of existing vegetation to be preserved around the Creekside Manor. That's what's being preserved, probably 75 or even more. And all the vegetation, that dark vegetation around the home site is greater than 75 feet. So the Creekside Estate is the front and center piece of this development. So we're maintaining all those trees. Talking about single-family homes, the lot widths, as I mentioned, we reduced the number of lots. We heard that. But really want to focus on the 150 and the varying setbacks. I mentioned that, she mentions Hooper Lane and Harlesdale Manor. All those are 26 to 40 feet off the right-of-way. We're 150 plus. So we just want to mention that. Then space between buildings, we heard from you. We increased the side yard setbacks, but also increased the width of the lot. So it's a combination of both along the frontage in the opening main portion as you look into the site east and west. I wasn't sure about the lot depth, Amanda, that you're talking to, but 108 to 120 is kind of a typical dimension of a lot depth. If you look at Harlesdale Manor, Miles Manor, those are typically in the 120 to 140 foot range depth. So I'm not sure the difference there, but maybe you can explain that. But we want to maintain a good lot depth, but also have the variety in lot width as well. And again, those houses are much closer to Franklin Road, Hooper Lane, everything along Franklin, everything south of this project is much closer to Franklin Road. The multiplexes section she talks about, refers to, the width of the multiplexes are 70 feet, plus or minus. Those are, as she mentioned, in keeping with Harlesdale Manor. That's about the same width, or even a little bit bigger. You mentioned about the height of the buildings, Amanda. Maybe I'm not an architect like Mike, but can you pull up the Harlesdale Manor real quick? The elevation. Oh, I'm sorry, the multiplexes. So I call these 2.5 stories. These are really 2 stories, I guess 2.5 with a dormer. When I looked in the Franklin design guidelines, I saw this picture of the big house, and that's what we were trying to mimic. So that's what I'm trying to establish here. So I'm not sure if there's a difference between in the document as opposed to that, because you look at these 2 images, the one from St. Charles, Missouri, this is kind of a designing factor that we kind of put into that. So, so hopefully that meets the intent, Amanda. I mean, we're not trying to get higher than we need to, but I call it 2.5, but it's really the dormer. They're 2 stories. And they are showing prominent entrances on the elevations, so that's something we've heard from planning, heard from you guys, so that's true. We're not disputing that. The building separation she mentioned, we didn't specify, but it's minimum 15, but it could be up to 25, 30, depending where they are, but they are relegated to the rear of, behind the single-family lot, so they're not on Franklin Road, they're pushed back, either fronting the church or interior to the site. So in summary, we reduced the number of lots along Franklin Road, increased the setback, tried to get more variety, pushed them back from the street with a 150 setback. But in terms of the building setbacks, the 150 scenic corridor plays a significant role in maintaining the open real appearance in the gateway of Franklin. We realize that. That's very strong on this project as opposed to the other houses that are much closer to the street as you drive into the town. With the incorporation of this large setback, inclusion of trees, landscape, fencing, trails, much like we did on Carlisle, to create that rural character is what we're trying to accomplish. We believe this creates a strong rural landscape character, and knowing that potentially that every building will have to be reviewed by this board. So it's a lot to take in, but I appreciate your time and just welcome any feedback. And
Gary, one
questions.
question. You still
Yeah.
got, you said several times you've reduced the number of lots
Along Franklin Road.
along Franklin, but you've still got 166 living units. Is that
Correct.
right?
Yes,
Okay.
Yes.
I want to make sure.
you got it. You're right.
Okay, are there any citizens that wish to comment on this request? All right, hearing none, we need a motion from,
No, you stop.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's fine. Go ahead.
Yeah, would you please, yeah, come to, just
Clear my
identify
junk.
yourself for the minutes and,
My name's Alan Sims. I live at 119 Lewisburg Avenue in Franklin. I guess my biggest concern is that this is the corridor into, a gateway into Franklin, and having a bunch of houses right in a row just doesn't seem like that's the rural character. So I think we can do better. I think we can get a better plan, so.
thank you. Anybody else?
Good evening. I'm Lynn McAllister at 723 Fair Street. This is just based on some surveys that we have done with the DNA board, has done with all of our members. One concern that continues to come up is the amount of traffic that we are seeing that are coming into our gateway. So I agree with Mr. Sims about the rural landscape is so very important to us. But I'm trying to focus just on what our concerns that we're hearing from our members are, and that's one that's continually coming up. And obviously, 166 homes, we're looking at, several hundred more vehicles in that, coming in that area, in a close area. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Commission, we need a motion then in order to start our discussion. Don't everybody?
I'll make a motion.
Okay.
I recommend that the Historic Zoning Commission disapprove, make a recommendation of disapproval to the Franklin Municipal Planning Commission and BOMA
And would you add with staff comments?
with staff comments.
Thank you.
Supporting staff comments.
Thank you. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Thanks, Ken. He got his hand up first.
Oh, you got there.
All right, discussion. Ms. Besser.
I think that, in looking, I actually sat in on the public comments that you did a couple of weeks ago to kind of get a better feel for this. But the words I have written down are density and immensity. And I think that when I ask what you were using as your precedent, what you used, the words or the project you used were West Haven and Berry Farms, and those do not, they are their traditional neighborhood, but this is a rural context, and we're not trying, I hate to see a traditional neighborhood in this rural context. And so that's my big concern.
Mr. Chair, go
All right,
ahead.
now, Mary?
I was going to say that this is the last gateway into Franklin that has its historic context intact, and I feel that it deserves a very inspired plan, and that would achieve keeping some of the context of what everybody, I remember for years people have said to me, when I drive down Franklin Road, I know I'm in Franklin. And we know what has happened on the other side of McHatcher. And I just think, I think what Alan Sims said, we can do better. I just think we can do better on this.
Okay. Nick?
Yeah, thanks. My only concern is the side yard setbacks and the density of the single-family homes. I think the rendering you provided from the views with homes dropped in, I mean, that just, it doesn't look historic at all. It's very dense. It reminds me of kind of driving through, some of the neighborhoods that have popped up in the Brentwood area. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with them. I just don't think it's appropriate for that particular piece of property. And so for that reason, I would support support not recommending this.
Okay, others? Anybody else? Brian? You got it? Thank you. Okay, we're ready to vote? Josh?
Mr. Chair, as I mentioned, I'm going to have to recuse myself for purposes of today because we had an issue on our conflicts check.
Okay,
So,
all right, got it. Anything else? All right, we're ready to vote. Let's do this by hand vote. Then all in favor of the motion to disapprove the recommendation to Planning Commission in Boma, please raise your hand. Okay, it's unanimous with one abstention or recusal.
Appreciate your time, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Our next item is preliminary recommendation, request for potential development at 600 Boy Mill Avenue, 906 Studio Architects applicant. Amanda?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will zoom in as much as I can, but I'm happy to toggle back and forth. I cannot fit this on the screen very well and it still be clear for everyone in the audience, so I'm just going to keep it right here for now. This, like the last item, is a preliminary Historic Zoning Commission recommendation request to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen and Planning Commission as related to a potential development proposed to be located at the historic property located at 600 Boyd Mill Avenue, which everyone knows as Magnolia Hall, the William S. Campbell House. It was constructed circa 1840. It's an Italianate home. It's a notable example of such. The applicant did host a site visit for the DRC at its September 21st meeting last year. The DRC recommended that the building placement be adjusted to allow for more view shed of Boyd Mill Avenue from vantages along Glass Lane. And overall, the DRC supported the development of more than 5 buildings on the property, which was what was previously recommended by our Envision Franklin document, and has since been amended to allow for more. But the DRC did note that it did not necessarily support the lot count requested at that time for discussion. So based on those recommendations, the applicant has relocated the entrance from Glass Lane to Boyd Mill Avenue, and at the request of DRC, has removed the use of 2-story buildings and has indicated that all buildings will measure 1.5 stories. So a little bit more on context. The Boyd Mill Avenue Historic District contains most of the parcels that are located between 11th Avenue North and Jim Warren Park. So on this screen, Jim Warren Park is immediately to the left. There is a modern infill condominium development, or townhome development, excuse me, across the street. And then this is the remainder of Boyd Mill all the way to 11th Avenue North. Above here is 96 West. You can see the big pond. I think everyone's familiar with that. I just want to give everyone in the audience some context. So Boyd Mill Avenue is a historic district that's representative of a diverse collection of revival dwellings, colonial revival, folk Victorian bungalow styles that were constructed early to mid 1900s. The Italianate Magnolia Hall predates all of these buildings. The district is characterized by some deeper setbacks on the northern side of Boyd Mill. And the more modern development located across the street has setbacks that range between 45 and 100 feet from the roadway. The potential development consists of 12 houses on individual lots. I'm going to zoom out just a second so you can see it all. So this would be Boyd Mill. This is Magnolia Hall, the historic resource. And the lots start from here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, all the way to 12 with a cul-de-sac in the end. Per Chapter 18 of the zoning ordinance, as mentioned by the previous applicant, there needs to be a historic edge treatment to lessen any potential adverse impact to the historic resource. Previous applicant is utilizing a naturalistic screen. This applicant is proposing to utilize what's called an integrated edge, which seeks to incorporate the historic resource into the overall design of the development, with the historic building remaining a prominent focal point, and the balance of the development appearing to have evolved around it over time. New buildings within the view of the historic resource must be designed to be similar in scale and architectural character to the historic building as part of that requirement. As conceptualized, the proposal demonstrates a green open space in front of Magnolia Hall, both here and then along the drive here. The location is based in trying to maintain the original entry to the development at this gate that's currently located here. The street network allows Magnolia Hall to serve as a focal point within the development, and the lot containing Magnolia Hall is significantly larger than any adjacent lot, and the proposed new buildings are subordinate in scale to this historic building. As for lot sizes and configurations, as I mentioned previously, they are very important considerations at this point in the review process because parameters such as those dictate the building form, and therefore determine if applicable design guidelines at the point that the Historic Zoning Commission's reviewing the new houses can be applied appropriately. Side yard setbacks are also an important facet of this review because they determine the potential building envelope for each lot and affect how closely situated the buildings are to one another as related to maintaining the rhythm and spacing of the development along the street. The guidelines recommend that one reinforce and maintain existing setbacks of adjacent buildings. This property is located on an independent block face with no existing rhythm established. It's just simply this historic building here with the lake and the open space in front. So the conceptual site plan does not specify front yard setbacks for any of these buildings. Analysis of the district and the adjacent properties indicates that the average front yard setbacks along the north side of the street are 60 to 80 feet deep from the pavement. And the closest building to the street on the south side is approximately 25 feet from pavement. Others cluster in that 40 to 55-foot range. It seems to be the predominant setback along Boyd Mill Avenue. The average seems to be between 40 and 55 feet deep from the pavement. The development across the street, as I mentioned, is the first row of townhomes are about 45 feet back for reference, and then the others are about 100 feet back that are perpendicular to Boyd Mill Avenue. The proposed width of the lots appears to be mostly consistent with the neighborhood, especially those located along the north side of Boyd Mill Avenue. The depths of the lots are shallower than those seen on the north side, but are configured in such a way as to allow for a typical building form. The spacing between the buildings seems to vary, but the clusters of development on the north side with tighter side yards on Boyd Mill Avenue interspersed with larger parcels with wider setbacks. So it does vary a lot on Boyd Mill Avenue. Garage placement also affects building form, and it's an important consideration at this time. The guidelines recommend that in areas where historic garages are typically detached, that new garages appear to be detached as well. Attached garages should be designed in such a way as they're located at traditional locations behind the rear plane of the house, on the rear plane of the main form of the house, or otherwise not visible from the street. So the Boyd Mill Avenue Historic District does feature more detached accessory structures than they do attached garages. So detached garages or non-visible attachment of garages would be appropriate at this location. The orientation of the lots, or the garages at lots 1 and 2, which is right here. This is 1. I'll go ahead and zoom in a little bit. This is lot 1, and this is lot 2. The orientation of these buildings causes the garages to be viewed as attached from Glass Lane. And in that case, would not be supported by the design guidelines. Similarly, the attached garages at lots 6 through 12, here's 6 through 8 rendered, 9 through 12 not rendered, but potentially designed similarly to these, would cause the garages to be viewed as attached from Culberson Drive here and Boyd Mill Avenue here, which is also not recommended by the guidelines. So it would be recommended that any sort of view shed to the garages be a detached view, detached garage view. As for architecture, the integrated edge does require that buildings within the view of the historic resource be designed to be similar in scale and architectural features of the historic building. The guidelines recommend this as well, noting that new construction should be designed to be comparable in scale, height, proportions, massing, architectural features, and that new construction complement rather than detract from the character of the neighborhood. The applicant indicates a desire to use a number of different styles here. The applicant is looking at a range of Victorian, folk Victorian, simple Italianate, classical styles, which are appropriate to this site. The one exception I would suggest is the Tudor Revival style, which is not appropriate for this site or the overall Boyd Mill Avenue district. With that, it is recommended that the commission provide a favorable recommendation to, or a recommendation of approval, rather, to the Planning Commission in BOMA with the considerations as listed below. Those would be that the building forms created by the proposed lot configurations are mostly consistent with the historic or infill buildings located along Boyd Mill Avenue, and that meaningful alterations to those garage locations, whether they're detached from the main form of the house or the building's reoriented in such a way as the garages do appear to be detached from main visible views, would allow the buildings to be supported by the guidelines. As the integrated development approach in the zoning ordinance requires, this is sitting on its own block face. So a closer setback for lots 1 and 5 may be appropriate, as demonstrated on the north side of Boyd Mill Avenue. But it's recommended that the Historic Zoning Commission comment on and provide a range for the front yard setbacks, as well as the other lots. What I'm trying to get at is the setbacks aren't defined here. And so it's really important for you to provide that feedback to Planning Commission and BOMA at this time. The development plan also sets entitlements for the setbacks, not just from the front yard, but the side yards as well. The building envelopes that you see here, especially on lots 9 through 12, it's these dotted lines. And what I mean by building envelope is like the area that's defined where the building could be situated. Typically, building envelopes are drawn to accommodate the anticipated or required setbacks for the front yard, the side yards, the rear. This is a typical situation, but the building envelopes on this conceptual plan should align with the intended building footprints. Even on the buildings that have already been rendered in, you see a significant amount of open space, which may be what the applicant's intending, but for the purposes of entitlements, it's really important that these building envelopes align with the intended setbacks so that the commission, the planning commission, the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, the public will understand the intent of how much building will be on each lot. And then further, the architectural styles proposed by the applicant, with the exception of Tudor Revival, are appropriate to the site and meet the intent of the zoning ordinance. Thank you.
Mr. Hathaway.
Yes, sir. Thank you, guys. Great to see everybody. I'm Mike Hathaway with 906 Studio Architects. I appreciate where you guys are. I used to be there and know what the effort is to do what you guys do. Thank you for doing that. Good to see new faces as well. We are pleased to come back after hearing your comments. We're pleased to come back with a less dense plan. We had 16 lots, I believe, the last time we met on site, and we're down to 12 lots plus Magnolia Hall. We have done a lot of visioning to make sure that we're making Magnolia Hall the key piece of this property. As you can see down the center, we've saved the existing gravel drive, and we propose moving the iron gates from the outside to that inside piece so that in creating the entrance off of Boyd Mill, we don't lose that special design feature that everybody that drives by understands and appreciates. So we want to maintain that. Glad, as we go forward, glad to make sure these garages appear to be detached or attached. Where visually they appear to be detached. Glad to make that a requirement. We're also pleased to propose 1.5 stories as opposed to 2-story. All this, and Bernie Butler, the developer client, will say as well that our intent is to make Magnolia Hall the special jewel that it is. And I don't say that lightly because that's really the intent all along. This is a project driven by the preservation of Magnolia Hall. Discussion about the setbacks, I want to explain. One is between lots 3 and 4, we've got about 125 feet separating those two. So while it may look congested because we've got a lot of trees shown, we hope ultimately that those trees do become a part of the beauty of this entrance. It does make it look more tight than it really is there. So the width between houses 3 and 4 are lots 3 and 4 are as deep as, or as wide as the depth of those lots. So it's a pretty significant opening as you drive down Boyd Mill. And right now, if you drive down Boyd Mill, because of all the vegetation, you really don't see Magnolia Hall. So we're going to make sure that those trees are limbed up and you can see the beauty of the house that it is. As you guys know, I've lived here for 28 years, and I didn't know that the front door of Magnolia Hall was on Boyd Mill. It always looks like it's what faces that lake. So we're trying our best to celebrate the real entrance to Magnolia Hall, as well as preserve what the beauty of that lake view in the back and make that an amenity for the neighbors that live there. The front setback we're proposing, and we should have shown that on the plan, but from the street edge, we're proposing 40 feet to the front porches of those houses that face Boyd Mill. And there are some houses on the other end, the eastern end, that are about 18 to 27 feet off of Boyd Mill. So we believe that the character of what we're trying to create here, it would be nice to have a little bit of compression in that area, driving down Boyd Mill, because, again, we want to celebrate what the beauty of this site can be. We also don't want to push these lots back and crowd the Magnolia Hall site either. And, going back to where we started, we originally were allowed to have 5 lots on this site. And we didn't want to have 5 big houses that compete with the size and scale of Magnolia Hall. So we feel like that we have created a plan that will, again, celebrate what is special about that house. I'd like to let Bernie come up and kind of explain what he's looking for out of this site. But again, thank you guys for the opportunity, and we appreciate your time.
What a pleasure it is to be back in front of historic zoning. I feel like I've spent a lot of time around the table right on this floor right here. I, like Mike, appreciate all the effort you guys take to be prepared for these meetings and do what you do. So thankful for that. We've been working on this project for 18 months with the planners and Amanda and Sweet Kelly and all of their bright intellect to try to figure out this site. This property has been on the market for a decade. The probably first and best option for Magnolia Hall, and if you don't know, Magnolia Hall is the home itself has not really been worked on for 30 years. And the other outbuildings, and in particular the building to the right that you see over there, which is a beautiful stone building which we're going to restore, and the old spring house on the lake, which we're going to restore. Something needs to be done. The first choice would obviously, in my opinion, be for the city to buy the property and leave it open like Carnton, so that people could come inside the house and see the property. As you know, I don't think that the city is excited about buying Magnolia Hall. Probably the second best choice would be for somebody else to buy it and continue it as a single-family residence on 12 acres. The property's been on the market for 10 years at all kind of different price points. Nobody really wants to bite the bullet to try to fix it up and to deal with the property, which is why Envision Franklin in their vision basically said, it's going to probably take some development around Magnolia Hall to try to find a way to protect Magnolia Hall. And so, because I knew Ann when I worked on a restoration of a house on Boyd Mill, 415 Boyd Mill, which was interesting. The opportunity was created for me to try to put a development contract on the site to give us time to try to figure this out together. And so collectively, we've been trying to figure this out together, and we had you guys, some of you guys on the site. I don't know how long ago that was. It was September. And so there's just been a tremendous amount of behind-the-scenes work to be able to come up with this plan, which we believe is going to allow us to be able to celebrate Magnolia Hall and at the same time create a really special neighborhood around it and give people access for the first time to really come into the property and see the building itself. So we know we got a lot of work left to do, and we appreciate your encouragement, and so that we can continue to move on. The intent here is that, like I did with the brownstones, is that we design every one of these homes and present them all for approval. And the intent is these will not be, each one of these homes will be unique to the other one. And, but it will obviously would be coming back to you guys for each one of these houses on these lots. But my intent is to basically design those houses, and somebody would be buying a house that is pre-designed and we know exactly what we want on those lots. So we would be getting to kind of do that together, which will be a fun process, because I think they're going to be beautiful, but they're going to be scaled in the right way, and which was an encouragement of Mary, which I thought was a good thing. So be glad to take any questions or anything. If I can help, I will.
Are there any citizens wish to comment on this application? All right, hearing none, is there a motion so we can begin discussion?
I'll make a motion.
Okay, Nick.
I'll move to recommend that we provide a recommendation of approval to the Franklin Municipal Planning Commission and the Board of Mayor and Aldermen with staff comments.
Thank you. Is there a second?
1 second.
Thank you, Ken. Okay, discussion. Let me start by asking, on houses 3 and 4, lots 3 and 4, there was discussion at the site visit about, I think these were a little closer together at that time. Is that correct?
Yeah, there was actually
And
five.
what change has been made to those? It looks like they've spread them out.
We actually lost a lot on the front.
Okay,
So the intent here was to say, basically, I want 4 perfect lots, and I want to open up that view shed.
that's what I'm getting at. Because
Yeah.
that was one of the things that we talked about at the site visit.
Right.
I mean, you've done, I'll give Mike the credit. Mike's done what we,
And
what we asked
Jason
to
Goddard.
do
And Jason Goddard.
at the site visit by reducing the number of lots and opening up and changing that entrance off of Glass Lane onto Boyd Mill Avenue.
Right.
I think the question we touched on here just a minute ago was on and Mike touched on it, and I wish you'd touch on it again, the setback from Boyd Mill. I think that's an important piece,
Yeah,
just to
we're-
make sure we all understand it.
Sure, we're currently showing 40 feet from the edge of pavement to the face of the porches.
Okay.
So the porches will be at least 10 feet deep,
11 feet.
11 feet deep. So
Okay.
the body of the house would be farther back than that.
All right, that's all I've got. Other questions, comments? Ken?
Yes, I did not make the site visit in September, and I'm just curious, what are the plans for the house, the historic house?
Well, part of the scheme here, if I can call it that, is.
That's what it is.
I mean, it's so part of the scheme is to try to use the lots to fund the ability to be able to lower the basis of what it would cost somebody to buy Magnolia Hall. So, she's had that house on the market for like $6 million, $5 million, $4.5 million, or whatever. So the intent is to basically use the lot sales to lower that basis. So somebody like, I'm having a 62-year-old moment, like our friend on Fair Street, Mel, like a Mel can come in and really, let's say that house is $2 million. Then somebody can come in and spend the $2 million to do the motor court and the garage addition, and, Gordon seems to think that there needs to be a master suite on the back of somebody. I don't know, but I know that there's probably some additions that would probably need to be made to the house for it to be, but we want somebody to live in it and enjoy living in it, but not have to take care of their yard and everything else that they want to. We are meeting the 50%
Open space.
open space characterization, and we really look forward to creating some really beautiful landscaping around that lake. So it's going to be, somebody's going to be able to create some kind of special property there. I'd like for it not to be me.
How, excuse me,
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, how many lots were on the proposal before?
16.
16, so you've gone from 16 to 12? Plus the,
Yeah.
so there were 13.
That included the house, that included
So
the
we've
Magnolia Hall.
lost 3 lots.
No, we would have been 17 before, if you count the Magnolia Hall.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I,
Mr. Chair, just for clarification, so the plan is for it to be a single-family residence, but your development plan does not include any restoration or work at that house?
My plan is not to restore the house myself. My plan is to find a great person to do the restoration of the house. And if that was not to happen, then I would make other arrangements.
Mr. Chair, so
I want somebody to live in it.
this back open area would be maintained by the neighborhood?
By
Is
the
that
HOA, yes.
plan?
Yeah.
This house was really, I would say, one of 2 places that set the preservation movement on fire in Franklin. When I look at this, I almost get sick at my stomach. So that makes me feel like we're not quite there yet. And the one that I'm thinking of where just the details went awry, and a sidewalk around Magnolia Hall will destroy the character of it, and the planning will require a sidewalk. I still, in my mind, think this needs some more work. I would like
I'm sorry, what, a what?
a sidewalk.
Yeah,
When you put
okay.
a sidewalk around a residence like this, you immediately urbanize it, for lack of a better word, when the context of it was the large lot. And when I look and see the sidewalks that are gonna kind of be going everywhere, I think there's gonna need to be some recommendations go forward with this. I personally think it still needs tweaked a bit, and that's what I would have to say. Thank you.
Well, with that in mind, do you want to make an amendment to this on the sidewalk issue? Remember, this is a conceptual plan.
I don't think so. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Any other comments? We ready to vote then? All right.
Mr. Chairman.
You're going to
this is-
recuse?
I've got to recuse on this one.
Okay.
Just pending some additional information we
All
need
right.
for the conflict check.
Mr. Chair, I would like to say that I do agree with you, Bernie, that the best option would be that someone had purchased it and actually maintained the property and taken care of it. And I know it's been on the market a long time. So, maybe this is what has to happen, and my vote may reflect that part of it. One thing I would like to ask is that when you do the architectural style, that everything harmonize with that house rather than end with the neighborhood, but take very special care of that. And I do agree with Mrs. Pierce on with the sidewalk, and you might consider that one as well, about what goes around the house.
I agree too. I mean, that's a planning thing. So maybe we have to get an exception from somebody
Yeah.
above my pay grade.
And I think just looking at the house placement, and if the best approach is the rear alleys or keeping it pushed back more to give some more exposure on the front, I just personally think it still needs some modifications before I would be comfortable recommending it.
And the 1 1/2 story form, I think, is very appropriate, not to compete with the main residence. I think that's a good move.
Thank you.
And that was a change from our site visit. Okay, any
Chair.
other questions? Ken?
Yep, I was just gonna say, I think that the Boyd Mill face is appropriate, the way the houses are aligned there. But this interior portion, there seems to be more hard surface than there needs to be. I understand the interest of having rear-loading garages, but in the interest of more open green space, or it just seems to have more hard surface than is absolutely necessary to make it work.
Well, I can tell you, we looked at 100 options. And so a lot of the observations that you have, we had. And so unfortunately, dealing with all of the requirements of that we're forced to deal with in order to actually try to create this neighborhood, we have to deal with some things that we wish if it was just us sitting around figuring this out on a piece of paper, we could do but maybe a little bit different. And, but I do believe, and what I can tell you is that I told everybody working on this, including everybody that we were working with the city, is that what I was trying to do was to create the perfect plan for Magnolia Hall. I wanted every lot to be the absolute perfect thing that it could be and still allow us to be able to get it done. And so I never had a list of how many lots. I never had anything other than what is perfect. And so, which is what we've tried to do, and we're at this point where we really feel like we have it. And I really do believe, you can't see Magnolia Hall, and it's never been seen from Boyd Mill. And so for the first time, you're actually going to be able to see this view line of this incredible home. Right now, the best view is really from Glass Lane. And so, which was part of the indication of leaving this view shed open from the Glass Lane side. So I think we're going to continue to, as we go through the process, I think there'll be things like this little sidewalk, and think there'll be other things that we figure out will be better that we can pull off. What I can tell you is I'm committed to doing whatever those things are, because I want it perfect. That's what I'm looking for. And perfect is that whenever we get done 25 years from now and people drive by, they'll say, that was incredibly well done, and everybody spent their time thinking about it. So that's what I got to say.
Okay, any other comments? Need to move on.
Sorry.
If not, are we ready to vote? Then, all in favor, please raise your hand. And we've got all opposed, then Mary, and one recusal. Okay. You got it, Amanda? Yes. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, our next item is consideration of Bicentennial Park Pavilion alterations located at 200 and 214 North Margin Street. City of Franklin applicant. Amanda.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The City of Franklin is proposing some improvements to Bicentennial Park, which is located between 3rd Avenue North and North Margin Street in the Harpeth River, just a couple blocks from here. It consists of approximately 10 acres. This project includes proposed design improvements to the existing pavilion structure, and development of the park, and general upgrades to establish a new event space for the city. The intent and purpose of this park is to serve multiple purposes by the City of Franklin Parks Department, including entertainment and other types of venues, as well as to serve as a park for the general public. So the purpose of today's application is to seek approval for the following alterations, specifically the improvements to the existing pavilion. You can see the rendering on the screen here. Improvements include needed structural repairs, the painting of the structure, the obvious replacement of the portion of the structure that failed during the ice storm earlier this year. The placement of minimal railings around the perimeter where needed. The construction of some ADA ramps, one on the north side of the pavilion, resurfacing that concrete floor, the construction of a ramp on that south side, the service, delivery trucks, things of that nature. And the construction of a loading dock at the northwest corner of the building. A new standing seam metal roof is also proposed to be installed. In addition, and I won't read verbatim, but there are proposals to add plazas, specifically at the 3rd Avenue North and North Margin Street intersection. A large outdoor gathering space would be proposed to be placed there. Demarcation of the interurban rail. As you all know, the interurban rail used to run through this area, so specialty pavement and interpretive signage is proposed to identify the route of that interurban rail that ran through the site. A pergola. So you can see from the photo I have on the screen, this is the what the pavilion shape used to look like. Portions of this had fallen due to that ice storm, but the intent is to have the form as it was and add a pergola kind of in this absence located here. The pergola is proposed to have an overhead trellis that under which there would be a space that's paved and flushed with that pavilion floor, providing an extension of the space. It would also provide some outdoor dining for the public. Planters, raised planters are proposed to be on that west side of the pavilion to help define additional entrances for pedestrian access to the pavilion. Parking, about 56 spaces are proposed to be located on the site. You can see some of those located here. This is 3rd Avenue Extension, most recently renamed MLK Way, by the way. A stage area is proposed. It's an extension here on this opposite side of the pavilion. So what's proposed here could be used for smaller outdoor performances, spectators sitting on the lawn. So in order to do that, a series of steps are proposed to be added that will not only allow for seating, but also allowed for a grade transition from the pavilion floor down to the grass below. The final thing I'd like to discuss is the dust collector feature. I can't remember exactly which page that's on, but we're all familiar with the site, and the Parks Department was very forward-thinking in saving not only the pavilion, but also a couple of the fixtures on the site that are left over from the former boot factory that was located there. So here is the dust collector. The applicant's proposing to repair and refurbish this. A portion of it will be removed and the drum will remain to allow as an entry feature at that east end of the park. It also provides a sculptural element, and we're hoping to highlight the park with a number of public art installations. This discussion, or this proposal was discussed at the Design Review Committee meeting last month in May, and the DRC provided favorable feedback on the proposal. So with this being a city proposal, there will be no recommendation from staff at this time, but I will say as far as review in light of any applicable guidelines and standards, the guidelines provide information for consideration on non-residential forms and non-residential projects, but the guidelines do not lend themselves to the review of this type of alteration, these types of structures per se. They're very, very rare in the community. We're very excited to have this opportunity. As such, I did review the Secretary of Interior standards for the rehabilitation of historic structures. Those are the federal standards by which the design guidelines are based. And so it seemed the most appropriate by which to review this proposal. These standards are also utilized by the State Historic Zoning Commission's office when they review proposals of this type as well. So the applicable design or Secretary of Interior standards would state that any sort of additions, alterations to properties such as this would not need to destroy the materials that characterize the property, and that the new work be differentiated from the old and be compatible with the massing scale, size, and architectural features to protect the historic integrity of the property and its environment. And further, any such work should be undertaken in such a manner that if removed in the future, it would allow the essential form and integrity of the historic property to be unimpaired. So with that in mind, looking through, generally the proposed alterations do meet the intent of those standards. It should be noted that certain proposed alterations within the plan set, such as the installation of the riser room, which would hold some equipment just above the floor there. Any ramps, the rain curtain that's proposed on the inside of the structure, and all railings should be installed in such a way as they could be removed in the future without any sort of negative consequence to the pavilion itself. So with that, I turn it over to the commission. Thank you.
Thank you. Good applicant, please introduce yourself and make any comments you want to make.
Hi, I'm Adrian Ward with Artist Design Solutions, and so we've been helping the city on this project. Amanda hit, it's obviously a variety of different elements. We're just trying, I guess, to refurbish a piece of abandoned property, sort of brace where we can, new paint, and then if we do have to add new, obviously there's some things that have to change as we're drawing folks to this space. The electrical, it's in a floodway, so obviously all the electrical equipment, we're bringing people here, so we're going to have fire suppression equipment. All that needs to be elevated above the 100-year flood elevation. But again, given that it is in a floodway, parks and amenities, things like that are the perfect spot. We tried to elevate where we can. Everything else is really hidden in the shadow of the existing property, so we've not really stuck anything else out of the ground that would impact upstream flood elevation. So tried to sort of stay with the existing landscape and add to what was absolutely needed. So happy to take any questions.
Okay. Are there any citizens which comment on this application? Hearing none, we need a motion then from the commission.
Mr. Chair?
Oh. Ken, was that you? Okay.
Yes, I move to approve.
Mr. Chair, I second.
All right, Brian, Ken. Discussion.
It's exciting. It's been a long time.
Certainly needed, and it looks like nowhere but up from
Yes.
what's there now.
Yeah, I've taken my kids to that park a number of occasions, and would love to let them play over there, but it's just, it's dangerous, and I'm nervous about it. But this is really exciting, and it's going to be a great benefit for the community.
Any other
Adding the-
comments?
Adding the interpretive interurban rail, is that something new? Was that submitted to us last time as well? That's a wonderful addition. I think that's very good. There's also a Williams County Historical Society marker, actually at the Franklin Presbyterian Church. This might make a great place to move that to, just throwing that out.
I really like the pergola concept, but Amanda, could you speak to how that ties into the Secretary of the Interior's guidelines?
Certainly.
Yeah.
So the pergola is proposed to be a freestanding structure that is adjacent to this pavilion. Now, admittedly, I spent a lot of time researching when this pavilion was constructed, and I couldn't find an exact date. But the pergola is proposed to be installed in such a way that it is just adjacent to and not necessarily touching the structure. And Adrian, please correct me if I'm wrong. But as far as the Secretary of Interior standards go, that would be appropriate because it would not have any sort of impact to the existing pavilion.
Yeah, that's right, and it'll be, based on the last round of comments, it'll be flush with everything else, so you'll step, the only difference is the not 100% waterproof when you walk out on it, but it'll all be separate.
And in a way, having the pavilion and then the pergola next to it, it helps further differentiate the existing from the new. And so that's part of the reason I believe it was proposed, is that it's clear it's an addition, but it is more seamless and provides an extension of the space.
Thank you.
Any other comments? All right, all in favor of the motion, just please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, our next item is consideration of signage related to Franklin Road infrastructure improvements located between Harpeth River and Mack Hatcher Parkway. City of Franklin applicant. Amanda?
Yes. Sorry, just a moment. Okay, so again, this is a city project. The city is requesting a certificate of appropriateness for the signage at following locations: be 240 Franklin Road, where the MAPCO is located, 232 Franklin Road, where DT McCall's is located, 230 Franklin Road, Mafiosa's, and at the intersection of Lancaster Drive and Franklin Road, which is the entrance to Harpeth Meadows subdivision. The new business signs are proposed to be in the right-of-way in front of these three businesses, and the neighborhood sign is also included for Harpeth Meadows. So the City of Franklin's Franklin Road Corridor Improvements Project is currently under construction, as we all know. I think we all know it very well. This project scope includes the widening of Franklin Road from the Harpeth River to Hooper Lane, and includes some utility upgrades, undergrounding all the overhead electrical and communication lines, and new sidewalks on both sides of the road, decorative streetlights, etc. As part of that streetscape portion of the project, all of the non-conforming freestanding business signs are to be removed and replaced with decorative metal post and panel business signs, like the one you see on the screen here. So the city staff, planning and engineering, have worked together and are proposing to seek approval for these decorative post and panel signs to be installed by the city's contractor. And the signs will be more contextually appropriate to this corridor than the typical streetscape sign, which is more of that low brick encased monument style sign like you see on Columbia Avenue and on Hillsborough Road. The sign faces are proposed to be larger than those typically found in the downtown area due to the corridor's roadway classification. Now, the sign faces have yet to be designed. That would be done in tandem with the businesses, and those could be proposed to the Historic Zoning Commission or by staff at a later date. So right now, we're really looking at the sign styles and just the panels, exactly how they look, with the exception of the writing that would go on each panel. So the DRC did discuss this proposal at its May meeting and provided favorable recommendation at that time. The first sign, I'll just kind of go through them very briefly. This is proposed at MAPCO. It is proposed to have an approximate 25 square foot sign face. The width is proposed to be about 7.5 feet wide. The height being 7 feet plus finials. The signpost and framing are proposed to be Franklin green in color, and the sign face proposed to either be the same color or black. And again, that would come back at a later date. For the second two signs, for Mafiosa's and McCall's, these would be the same signs as one another. These are proposed to be aluminum as well, same color as described previously. Post height is 7 plus the finials, with an approximate 17 square foot sign face. The width of the sign would be 6 feet wide. And then for the last sign, which is at Harpeth Meadows, this is actually proposed to be a post and arm sign. There's no sign there currently, but the neighborhood has expressed interest in having a sign. So Mr. Banks here from our engineering department has worked on specifications to help provide that. This sign would be post and arm. It would have an approximate 11 square foot sign face. The height would be 8 feet. Plus the finial. That was something that was adjusted after the design review committee meeting, where it was suggested that there be more space between the bottom panel and the grade surface below. The specific dimensions were kind of modeled after the Charlton Green sign that's located off of Murfreesboro Road. This would be the same materials and color as I specified previously for the other signs, with the exception of the 11 square foot sign face and the 8 foot tall height. So I will provide no recommendation, as this is the city item, but please note that if approved, the certificates of appropriateness will need to be issued for each of the sign faces prior to installation, either by the commission itself or by staff on behalf of the commission. Thank you.
Okay, William, welcome.
Thank you.
Would you like to comment on the application?
I think she did a fantastic job. Pretty much given the background of this project. Like I said, it's project's under construction. The city is purchasing and installing all of these signs. We've already taken down the McCall sign. The MAPCO, Mafioso's signs are still to be demolished. I don't know the exact timing of when that's going to happen, but we are trying to get something out there that looks good.
Okay, are there any citizens which comment on this application? Hearing none, need a motion from the commission so we can discuss.
I move to approve.
Okay, thanks, Susan. There's a second?
I second it. Mr.
Thanks,
Chair.
Kathy. All right, comments? Susan?
It's a great project. I'm all for it. It's wonderful.
Mary?
Would it be possible, as they come forward, if they want to not amend the size of it or anything, but the shape a little bit, just to let each business feel like they have their
I
own,
don't-
a
yeah.
little bit of identity? Is that going to be possible, like if one were square across the top, or just slight modification?
That has never come up before. The intent is, we've had our design team come up with these.
Okay.
If that's something the owner, or the business owner, or property owner requests, we can definitely look at that, though.
Okay, just slight.
Yeah.
I think overall, yes.
Nick?
Yeah, I have a question. What's driving the MAPCO sign being, it looks like it's 18 inches wider than the other two business signs, if I'm looking at that correctly. I'm just curious why that one's so much wider.
So one thing with this one is, we know working with gas stations, they're going to want
Price
a
changes.
little extra space to be able to put their prices on it, or at least a price for their gas, and so that's why they've got a little bit larger sign.
So MAPCO, that was my next question. So MAPCO will have their gas prices on there as well? Or is it just
That's what we were told. We don't have the final design from them yet, so
Okay.
it could change.
Interesting.
And I can add that that particular sign,
National news.
Mary?
That's,
Oh,
excuse me.
Go
I
ahead,
can
ma'am.
add that that particular sign is one that would come back to the commission for consideration. That would not be a staff decision one, because it is a unique one. And my understanding is that it would not be like a digital sign, that it would be a sign with individual numerals for the actual price.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Curious to see how that one looks.
Yeah.
That sounds good.
Well, my only question is, on several of these, is the height above the ground to the bottom of the sign. 12 inches for that MAPCO sign is awfully low. 12 inches, if I can read this, it's 14 inches on Mafiosa's and McCall's is awfully low. I would think it makes more sense to raise them and to, maybe 3 or 4 feet. You just have to look at that. There are a number of reasons. One's visibility, driving a car, and the other is on MAPCO, if they're gonna put a price change up there, those prices are gonna go away. Somebody's gonna pull them off there.
Mr. Chair,
So-
I concur.
So I think that needs to be looked at. I think also, the other question I had was on Mafiosa's. If you have that sign at 18 inches above the ground, and you have all that shrubbery that's currently there, you're not going to see that sign coming into town. The shrubbery's going to block it. I don't know if that shrubbery is intended to stay or not, but it's there now. So that's something that ought to be checked. I don't have any problem with the designs. We can deal with individual ones, but that, from a visibility standpoint, coming into town, you're not going to read it if all that shrubbery's there.
We'll,
Pardon me?
okay, we'll work with the factory on that to
Yeah.
make sure that's addressed.
Mr. Chair, I have a comment. You see this a lot in historic districts, that the signs are lower.
Yeah.
So I
yeah.
think that,
But 12 inches above the ground, I think that, because at the Harpeth Meadows sign, they've got it at 36 inches.
right.
Well, and that was raised, I think, in response to DRC feedback, right? That the sound, the fruit.
We wanted 'em
It was
higher.
gonna look like it was
Yeah.
just hitting the ground.
And
We
it's a
wanted it
smaller
higher.
sign.
That's right.
Typically, a post and arm sign does have more space between the bottom of the panel and the grade surface below. What we see downtown typically for post and arm or this particular type of sign, which is a type of post and arm sign, is that you do have a little space between the bottom panel and the grade, but not a significant amount like you would for a post and arm. We could definitely explore trying to adjust the measurements slightly if that's the will of the commission. We do want to try to keep these in scale with themselves.
I would suggest you look at it, just look at that, and then when we see final design on any of them that we see, that you will have dealt with that.
Okay.
But visibility was my big concern on that artery coming in and out of town.
Absolutely.
So my question is, with this approval tonight, do I need to there's questions about MAPCO sign being raised. I'd like to go ahead and get these ordered and manufactured, but I know the sign panels are still, the design is still upcoming. How does that work with this approval tonight? If we're going to raise the sign, do I need to come back and show a raised sign, raise that MAPCO sign up some? How does?
Well, I don't know how you're going to order if you don't know what the graphics are going to be. So you said you don't know what the graphics on these signs are going to be.
For the sign panel, yes.
Okay, but aren't you ordering all of it at once, or are you just ordering the posts, or what? I don't understand.
The materials, all the steel materials for the signs
The
themselves.
panel can be removed and applied.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, I mean, I just think I think these signs at 12, 14 inches above grade, I think I think they're just too low with the ones that I talked about. So that's all I'm.
Is there a condition of approval you want to make to the motion, Mr. Chair?
No, I'm interested in getting it done too. So it's, I don't know what the right height to tell you, in order to, but I think it just needs to be looked at. So I don't know what else to tell you on that.
Has MAPCO's approved the height and Mafiosos has approved the height, or have they?
Have they been asked to approve the heights?
They have not been asked to approve the heights.
Okay.
I was going to say, because usually they're the ones that are going to hone in on that visibility
That's
issue.
right.
And quite frankly, that's probably their greatest interest. I think that's a necessary question before
You order.
you really can proceed, because I think that, it's their signage. I know the city's paying for it, but they're going to care greatly about the height.
Well, that's exactly right.
And I know there's some places, and I can't remember them, where it goes down some, and that's going to make a difference in how it reads from the street.
I will add that these signs were designed to meet the standards of a typical post and arm and the height maximums that we generally see for any
Gotcha.
signage in the city of Franklin.
Yeah.
So to add a significant amount of height to each one would be outside of the norm for what you would see anywhere in the city, inclusive or non-inclusive of the
Okay.
historic districts.
Have these businesses seen any of these designs?
Yes, these general designs of the signs have been given to all the property owners. Some of the property owners have been condemnations, some of them have not. There's been lengthy negotiations with them. But as far as sign panels, we're leaving that up. Our sign contractor is going to work directly with them to make sure they get what they want on the sign panel.
Help me understand, is the landscaping in front of Mafiosos, is that going to be part of the streetscape redo? Will all that come out and be redone, or are you contemplating that's going to stay existing?
There is work going to be done, there is work to the landscaping in front of Mafiosos, yes. We're widening there in that area. We are adding sidewalk and doing some different landscaping along that corridor.
And so will the signage come out from the existing Mafiosa sign to come closer to the road?
Not according to what the drawing shows. It's showing right where the existing sign is, I think. That's my interpretation.
Yeah, I
of it.
can't tell. It's a little crowded up there
I
on the,
understand
on the
that.
drawing, so.
It's in the same island that it's in now.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get a sense for that, when the landscaping goes in, if that will mitigate some of the concern about the
may.
growth blocking the sign. I mean, I can't tell from the way it's drawn.
So on the plan sheet that's included with the packet,
Yes,
yeah,
sir.
it does show all new landscaping along that. We can work with our landscape architect who drew this up and try to have him take one last look at it to make sure.
All right, so
There's no
all those
concerns.
bushes that are there now will be coming out, that's what
Yes.
you're saying? all right?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
And it does look like the road doesn't dip down there, so that's good.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, I would echo Amanda's comments that the sign sizes are more typical for a monument sign, and we wanted to do an alternative to the monument sign because of the rural character of the corridor. And so the sizes are typical of what you'd see for a monument sign that would typically be placed in a location like this.
I have no problem with the sizes. My only concern was the height above the ground.
Those comments relate to the height above the ground as well.
Okay.
To have them any higher would be outside of what would be approved for anywhere else. And so that's why we want to be very cognizant of trying to stay within that, that general range.
So one question I have, will it be externally illuminated?
Yes, externally.
So you probably will put in some type of low landscape to hide that light. I don't know how you plan to do that, but
Yeah, it's externally lit. As far as the landscaping on this one, there's no landscaping around the external lights on this.
all right, so they will be visible.
Yes,
People will see
but they are
those.
decorative, very expensive, decorative external lights.
And speaking of that, in a past life, I expedited sign permits for a large sign company. And if these are coming back to us, my advice would be to wait until you get the certificate of appropriateness before ordering the sign.
Yes, will do.
Okay, I don't know that I think we've gotten bogged down here, and I think I did it, but, I mean, the ideal thing, and maybe we're too far down the road on this, the ideal thing is for you to talk with each one of these property owners on a proper height above the grade. And try to get some consensus on that before you order any materials. I don't have any problem with the design. The only problem I have is the height above the grade for visibility purposes. And if we can do that as an amendment or a condition of approval or whatever we want to do, I don't know the proper way to do that, Amanda, but.
Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair.
I'm sorry, Ken?
Yes, I was just going to say, looking at these, I think they're going to be as visible as the monument signs on Columbia Avenue are currently. I mean, it is a historic district, and it should be a slower traffic path, and most of the people that are going to DT because it's a destination for them. They don't need signage.
Well, we'll see. I mean, I appreciate the comment. So, any more comments on it? All right, we ready to vote? Then let's do this with a show of hands. All in favor, please raise your hand. All opposed? I had to do that. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, William.
Okay. Our next item, number 5, is alterations masonry at 255 4th Avenue South. Neil Paez applicant. Amanda?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do plan to make some comments, and then I did want to note that the applicant, Mr. Paez, has brought a translator with him this evening to help relay
Thank you. Welcome.
his comments. This is Okay. All right, so just to give a little background on the proposal, the applicant's requesting a certificate of appropriateness for the painting of the building located at 255 4th Avenue South. This is located on the screen, La Casa de Mi Padre. The original portion of the structure was built in 1929. The stone foundation, doors, windows were all salvaged from a previous building that was constructed on the site in 1896. The Holiness Tabernacle that was demolished there. These items were reused for the brick church that's situated here, and a winged addition, which you can kind of see from this photograph here, was added at a later time. I do not have the exact date, but it appears from the method of construction to be circa 60s or 70s for the construction, which creates this L-shaped building that you are familiar with today. This is a view from 4th Avenue. And then the church began in October 2012 applying primer to the building with the intent to paint it. The City of Franklin issued a stop work order, and planning staff met with the applicant to explain that a certificate of appropriateness is required in order to paint the building. That was not something that the applicant understood at the time. And so the painting of previously unpainted brick, or masonry rather, on buildings within the historic preservation overlay requires approval. And the main reason for that is that, alterations to masonry or alterations in general can affect the appearance and character defining features of historic buildings. Specifically with masonry, the painting can not only affect the appearance of the building, but it also affects the historic brick or masonry itself as far as its functionality. So brick contracts and expands. And moisture is absorbed, and so the application of a veneer such as paint could cause problems with the functionality of the brick. The city staff offered options to the applicant, and the applicant did appear before the November 9th meeting to ask to be added to the agenda as a non-agenda item. The bylaws do require a unanimous vote in order to add an item to the agenda as a non-agenda item, and the commission did not vote unanimously to add that item. They did ask for more information, however, to learn if the existing paint could be removed safely and effectively from the building. Excuse me. City staff researched paint removal methods, and with the applicant's permission, did purchase some materials for the applicant to utilize for a test patch removal. Unfortunately, that was right in the middle of December, and a lot of paint removal methods, due to manufacturer specifications, require application to a building to be done at a temperature above 50 degrees. I had to pick a Saturday in order to achieve that, so Mr. Piez and I, his son, and some other folks from the city team met on site to allow the applicant to add that to the building. It was a strong chance of inclement weather that evening, but it was like in the 40% range, and unfortunately it did rain, so it was not a successful application. So we were not able to conclude at that time if the test patch would actually work. The applicant did appear in December to report the results of that patch test. The DRC did request some additional information, namely to provide some professional estimates for the cost of removal of the primer, the cost of removal from just the historic portion of the building as opposed to the 60s, 70s addition that creates that L, and the method by which the paint could be removed safely and carefully from a contractor that has some experience with that. The commission also asked for information on how much the applicant has spent on paint currently and any anticipated costs moving forward to complete the project, presumably to compare the cost of one and another or another to see which one would be the most conducive by which to move forward. So following the DRC's request, staff provided those written recommendations to the applicant on how to procure that information. And the city also provided a list of companies that may be able to achieve that, just based on some research that was conducted. So following that, about 6 weeks later, staff followed up with the applicant to offer assistance with procuring that information. Staff also offered to place the item on the April DRC to allow the applicant to discuss any of those estimates. He did provide a single estimate that he was able to provide. I know that he was having difficulty with some of that, which is understandable. The applicant did appear and share that response. The DRC member suggested that the contractor be asked to determine how much a patch test would cost in order to make sure that method would even work on this building. The chair even reached out to the contractor to seek additional pricing information in order to assist with that. The staff provided that information, but the applicant decided ultimately that he did not want to pursue an additional test, but did ask to apply. So that is the application you see before you this evening. So the analysis, generally speaking, the design guidelines, as I mentioned, would not recommend the painting of historically unpainted masonry. It does affect character and functionality. And in terms of character, there are a lot of places in the districts that have different context, but the painting, if you can imagine painting historically unpainted masonry up and down Main Street, for example, that would really change the character of that. And it does change the character of this building based on the photographs I've seen. The guidelines do recommend that since textures, colors, and detailing of historic buildings or historic masonry help define that building, that one preserve and maintain those materials and details, and that if there is damage, repair rather than replace that masonry. The guidelines also recommend against the painting unless there's extensive patching or repointing that results in a patchwork of different masonry surfaces and mortar incongruencies. Sometimes when people repoint buildings, they use the wrong type of mortar, and that can cause problems in the brick, as we've seen on some other buildings. So as you can see on the photographs here, a majority of the building has been primed. The applicant did stop as requested by the city, so you can see the left portion and some various portions here have not been painted. Upon examination of the areas that have not been primed, as well as examination of photographs of the building previously, it doesn't appear that the masonry has extensive patching or repointing. As such, the request to paint the original portion of the building is not consistent with the guidelines. The request to paint the addition, however, may be appropriate as it appears to be of a 60s or 70s vintage. I don't have a clear date on that. I did consult our historic mapping. The addition was not built as of 1950. I do think it's later than that. So it is recommended that the commission deny the request to paint the building. And if it is painted, that it meet all the requirements of the city prior to moving forward as far as our Building and Neighborhood Services Department. Thank you.
Is that it?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Welcome, Mr. Piaz.
Thank you very much.
Any comments?
We are living here since 2003. Nosotros estamos viviendo acá desde el 2003.
We've been in the community since
Can you
2000.
step a little closer to the
Yes.
mic? Thank you.
We have been living here in town since 2003.
Amamos Franklin
We love the city of Franklin,
y apreciamos el esfuerzo que hacen todos ustedes
and we appreciate the great effort and the work that you all do
por preservar la historia de Franklin.
for preserving our history here in Franklin.
Cuando sometimos el certificado de apropiado,
When we submitted the certificate of appropriateness,
comenzamos con disculpas,
we began with our apologies,
pidiendo perdón,
asking for forgiveness
porque fue un error.
because it was an error.
Fue algo que no queríamos hacer.
It was not in our intent to do it that way.
Pero la solución no es remover la pintura.
The solution, as we feel, is not to remove the paint from the building.
Queremos preservar la integridad del edificio
We would like to preserve the integrity of the edifice, actually.
y no queremos convertir el edificio en un laboratorio de pruebas.
We do not want the edifice to become a laboratory of testing based on the commission. Like,
Yo hablé con Lee Company
I spoke with Lee Company.
y hablé con Commercial Painting,
I spoke with Commercial Painting,
específicamente con Ken Darby,
with Ken Darby, who's in charge
el dueño de Commercial Painting.
of Commercial Painting.
Y él me dijo que no había garantía de una restauración completa.
There is no guarantee that the procedure would restore the brick completely.
Consideramos que la solución
We consider that the solution
va a producir el efecto contrario.
will actually create the opposite effect of what is it's seeking.
Dañar el edificio.
It would actually damage the edifice or the masonry.
Así que nuevamente pedimos disculpas.
Once again, we ask and seek forgiveness.
Porque no fue nuestra intención.
It was not our intent.
Así que eso es todo lo que queremos agregar.
That's what we would like to share with you all.
Thank you. Are there any citizens which comment on this application?
Hi, I'm Brett Williams, 340 4th Avenue South, just down the street from the church. I just want to say, as a neighbor, we anecdotally, among having talked to a number of neighbors, it's fairly universal that we think it looks better, that it actually looks good. We understand the protection of the masonry and all that, but particularly given the inconsistencies across the addition versus the original, this kind of brings it all together. Also, we definitely have concerns that the remediation will likely not ever look right, and we'll end up back here asking to paint the thing or to fix that because it's a problem, which is just a waste of money and time and potential damage to the actual masonry. So understanding the mistake that was made, as a neighbor would simply appreciate the consideration of another way to acknowledge the mistake without continuing the disarray, cost, and risk to the building. That's it.
Thank you.
I'm Walter Green, and good to see you. I live at 227 4th Avenue South on a different block from Mr. Williams. And yes, we have a very close-knit neighborhood. We interrelate very well, communicate very well. Mr. Paez, for what it's worth, is a great neighbor, and we care very much for what you guys do. I've been before you a couple of times and totally respect how you keep Franklin protected. On the other hand, the neighbors would really like to see a solution. I can't recommend what the solution is. It's an awkward situation that both parties are in. We can see that. But we do encourage that you continue trying to find a solution. And for what it's worth, my survey of the folks on my block are that we also prefer the white, even though that's maybe not something we can just automatically do. But that's for what it's worth. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Any other citizens wish to comment?
Hi, I'm Jocelyn Goodwin, and I live at 1702 Twin Oaks Court, actually in Franklin. And as a concerned citizen, as an educator, I'm actually an educator, was how I know La Casa de Mi Padre has been in this location for quite a while, actually probably prior to the historic overlay happening in Franklin. So I was wondering how much of that historic overlay information is actually given to the community that is in it to let them know of the guidelines prior to any kind of renovation, or are they easily accessible? Is there education about that? Knowing that maybe not everyone has access to these meetings may not be translated into the language. How is this, and how can we have equitable practices in our community for all of our constituents and citizens? That is one of my concerns.
My name is Lenny Spice, 318 South Margin, and I am also the wife of Pastor Neil. But I would like to speak on behalf of our congregation. We would like just to say that we are extremely sorry for the inconveniences. We certainly didn't know when we started the whole process, because our heart was actually to improve the building, which is a very prominent corner. After everything was stopped, we were, not only embarrassed, but also very, very sorry. I have also apologized to my neighbors about, the building does not look pretty, and it's so, prominent, again, I would say. So it just cost us a lot of work to put the money together for the paint and everything, and sorry. I'm so sorry.
No, you're fine.
I'm
all
sorry.
right.
You're fine. Thank you very much. Thank you.
We've got one other gentleman coming up.
My name is Brian Goodwin. I'm at 1702 Twin Oaks Court. The translator is my wife. I'm also a deacon at St. John's Anglican Church, and know how important it is for money in a congregation to go to things that are really important to the congregation. And I know that Casa de Mi Padre does a lot of service for the community. And so if it can be taken into consideration the best use of their money at the place that they are right now, to not set their congregation back by creating a situation that causes more cost than is necessary. That's my thought.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay. Commission, we need a motion then to start discussion here.
May I ask a question?
Yeah.
So I understand you put primer on the building. Is the intent, if it was to move forward, the building would be painted white? Is that?
That's the intention. That's the purpose.
Okay, okay. So the primer it's going to be overlaid with white then?
Yes.
Got it.
All right. We need a motion then.
Mr. Chair, I move to deny issuance of a certificate of appropriateness for the proposed masonry alterations based on the staff analysis and recommendation dated June 14, 2021.
All right, is there a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
All right, discussion.
I have a question for Mr. Paez. And can you relate to the commission what cost estimates you've received to remove the paint? And if you can separate that by the main structure that's historic from 1929 and the addition from the 1960s?
Well, I sent it to Amanda. I sent it. We received just one proposal from Ken Darby Commercial Painting. I talked to him. He doesn't guarantee that it would be restored to original, place. So, but I sent it to her. It would be $16,000, kind of rounding. We didn't separate the two. I'm assuming that it's the entire building, adding the 1960 part that was added later.
Mr. Lester, I can confirm that the $16,000 was for the entirety of the building, and I do believe
It was.
Mr. Roberts.
I can give you the specifics on it. It would, that company quoted $11,650 to remove the paint or the primer on the entire building, both sections of the building, and then another $5,000 to do a water repellent treatment on the entire structure. I've subsequently talked to Mr. Darby because I've done some work with that company and asked him to revise the pricing to just the historic structure, because that's where I thought we were beginning to get some progress in our 2 or 3 design reviews that we've talked about this. And he told me that the blast removal that they would have on the historic structure would be $8,750, and a sealer on that structure would be $3,190, and then you would paint over the primer on the back structure. He also told me that their company would have a minimum charge to come out and do a test sample for $875. That's a minimum charge to come out and do the research. By doing the test, we would know whether there is any problem or whether it can be removed satisfactorily. And then we would have a little bit better basis for making a determination. He has done the same thing in Nashville. Marathon Village was an example of a location where that was done. So we understand what has gone on. We've heard it. We're sorry. We're trying to come to the best conclusion without setting some precedent on painting historic structures, brick structures that have not been painted previously. That's been the overriding thing that we've all struggled with during our discussions. This is the first time tonight that we've actually had an application to kind of officially deal with. So that's a little more of the specifics on this right now, but we did reach out because it said we would do that at the last design review. And that's what I did in talking to Mr. Darby. So we have a motion on the floor to deny it now. So is there any more conversation about that?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'd like to say that I sympathize with the church, and I think it's a very unfortunate situation. So for me, I've talked to people in the neighborhood too, and they all will mention, some say aesthetically, it's about an aesthetic issue, that some say it looks good. And then others say, well, we preferred the brick. And for me, it's not so much an aesthetic issue, it's one of our guidelines. So since I've been on the board, anyone who's come before us and asked to paint their brick, the board has denied it for unpainted brick. And I know that if any of the churches in town that are currently unpainted came before our board, I know that I'd have to support the guidelines in saying that, denying it. And that's my stance and where I'm coming from on it. I'd like to see maybe that getting a test, like you said, from Darby or someone else to see if it can be removed. I think it can be. And I'll tell you why I say that. The Williams County Courthouse used to be painted. Also, the Kennedy House on Church Street used to be painted. They're no longer painted. They're back to their original brick. And I believe that it can be removed. And I'd like to see us explore that more.
I'm sorry, what?
I'd like to see us explore that possibility more.
Okay, any other questions, comments? Susan?
Well, I would concur with Mr. Laster. I think that the test that was done in the winter was not really the best time to do that. And so I don't think we really know exactly what's possible, and I'd like to see what is possible. And I totally get that, the situation, and I'm sorry that, I feel sorry that we're to this point. But I feel like that, again, we have to worry about setting precedents when we approve painting buildings. So if there's some way we could find out, the potential, what the potential is, I think that would be very helpful for us and make us feel good about this.
Any other comments from
Well, I just feel like it's so unfortunate, but like you all are saying, if somebody else comes forward, it's going to create another situation. So I would like to see the test done.
By somebody other than us?
By someone other than us, by the professional, yes.
And Mr. Chair, I'd like to make one more comment on the financial hardship of removing that, and just suggest that a church is a community. It's a community of faith. But you also are located within another community, and that's the Franklin community and those that live around you. And I know they're generous people. Mm-hmm. And I know whether through volunteerism or some other means that you might make an appeal and you may find a great coalition of all your communities, which this could turn out to be a very positive event.
Okay, Nick?
Yeah, I just want to say that I do sympathize with y'all. I feel horrible for the mistake that's been had. I am also very concerned about setting precedent of the next person that comes in and says, I made a mistake, but can you go ahead and approve it? And we haven't done enough diligence to determine what the actual cost of removal is, whether it can be removed. My suggestion is it sounds like we should do a test, but I also think that you should obtain multiple quotes. I would suggest no less than 3 for removal, if possible, or if unable to get 3, let us know why. Because I do know the quotes can vary drastically, particularly in this market right now. And I think armed with that information, I think we can make a more educated decision and help distinguish that from future decisions when setting precedent like this. So, thank you.
Yes, I have a comment on that. I did a research, and also I talked to Amanda. She gave me a list, 2 of them. Lee Company Restoration, the company that we see, we are familiar with it, and commercial painting. But besides that, I called a number of people. They did a test when they saw the scope of the job, they didn't submit any proposal because it wasn't, basically, we want to restore to its original place. So when they saw that, they didn't submit a proposal. So we just have one proposal that was submitted, and it's Mr. Darby, Ken Darby, commercial painting. Not even Lee Company submitted the proposal.
Okay, any other comments? Ready to vote? This is a motion to deny then. Then all in favor of the motion to deny, please raise your hand. Okay, it's unanimous. Thank you, sorry. All right.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, could I suggest that we have a 10-minute recess?
Yes. Would you make a motion that we have about a 10-minute break here?
I move that we have a 10-minute recess.
And I'll second.
Third, approved.
We're filming now.
Yeah, we're back live. Okay, we're going to reconvene here. So our next item is consideration of partial demolition and addition principal at 212 Lewisburg Avenue. And I see Mr. Burke is not here. So-
Yes.
All right, Amanda.
All right, so Mr. Burke did apologize. The owners are more than capable of representing the item tonight. Before they speak, I'll give my comments. So the application is for the partial demolition of the structure through the removal of an existing rear screen porch. I'm going to go to the photographs and bear with me just a second. Okay, so here are the existing conditions. You see the front of the house, the front right corner. This is the left elevation. And then on the rear, the request is to remove this rear screen porch. And to replace it with the construction of a rear addition, and then modify the existing dormer on the rear, which you see here in this lower right photograph, and kind of extrude that out to allow for the expansion of upper level space. So the applicant and/or the property owners appeared before the DRC at a series of meetings, and the last being a site visit, which the owners graciously hosted on April 19th this year. So as far as partial demolition goes, as I mentioned, the demolition's limited to the rear screen porch. The applicant included some photographs to demonstrate that area and new materials. The construction date of the rear screen porch is unknown, but the building portion does not appear to be historic. And the guidelines would recommend against demolition of historic buildings and structures. And in this case, the proposed demolition is limited to that screen porch and will not have an adverse impact on the historic resource, the log cabin itself. As far as additions, the guidelines recommend that additions be designed basically to be clearly contemporary yet compatible with the proportions, forms, materials, and details of the building, and be limited to no more than half of the footprint of the original building. So I'm going to go back to, this is a great elevation here. This is the south side, or what might be easier to refer to as the left elevation of the building. You see the existing down at the bottom, proposed above. The location as proposed is largely at the rear of the building. Although most of the additions behind the rear of the house, you can see on this right elevation, there is a portion that will jut out slightly from the plane. You can probably see that better on this site plan. Right here. There's a slight portion that'll be visible from the right side elevation. The main level addition is designed to read primarily as a glassed-in, screened-in area. Glassed-in or screened-in area. So you can see on the right side, this is predominantly glazing, and then at the rear would be screening. The incorporated insets, offsets, and material changes do differentiate the form from that of the historic structure. The upper level is inset several feet from the side facade walls, so this portion is recessed a substantial amount back from this existing eave line, and then further, of course, from the addition behind the existing side addition here. Initial discussions with staff and the design review committee indicated concern about the proposal's overall massing, and the applicant has revised the proposal to incorporate the recommendations of the DRC by lessening the overall square footage of the upper level and recessing the mass of the upper level away from the corner of the building, which allows the original residents to remain more fully exposed at side vantages and allow the upper level to read more as an extruded dormer rather than a full upper level addition. The proposed chimney, as shown here, is not entirely consistent with that seen on the historic equivalents. The guidelines state that additions should be designed to be clearly contemporary yet compatible with proportions, forms, materials, and details of the building. This chimney has been reduced in size, but it's a double flue, so it is wider than what you see on the historic chimney on the same side of the building. I did speak with the architect, the applicant, who was unable to attend the meeting but did have some comments for me. This is proposed to be a double flue. He did orientate the mass away from the public view sheds in an attempt to try to lessen how much is appearing from the street. So if you look at the front elevation, I went the wrong way. He believes that it would appear less massive than an existing one. Further, he stated that the chimney is a foot shorter than the existing, but because the property is situated pretty substantially back from the street, and then this chimney, of course, further back from this one, that it will have the appearance of being even more subservient than the 1 foot. The next comment I would have would be on materials. The proposed materials of the addition are mostly consistent with the guidelines. I did have a question for the applicant on the proposed foundation. It was a little unclear from the materials, but I did get some clarification. So existing foundation is a stone. And as you know, matching stone to stone is very difficult. So typically on additions to buildings with stone foundations, someone uses a different type of material. What the applicants propose to do here is a board-formed concrete. So that's very rarely done in our historic district, but essentially it would be pouring cement into something that has wood sides so that the wood grain is tied in or created onto the side of the concrete. I'm going to pull up an example of that to be more clear. Bear with me just a moment. But the idea would be that it's concrete and it would have the appearance of like a wood embossing on it. The top one here is not that, it's this here. Alternatively, I did mention to the applicant that a stucco applied to a CMU is a common type of solution to that type of problem, and so this is that. So either one is acceptable to the applicant from what I understand as how they'd like to move forward. And I was told by the applicant that he would like to seek approval for both options and then weigh that moving forward. But I do encourage the commission to comment on that when it makes a motion. Okay, and moving forward with the stone for the chimney for the material, Mr. Burke did mention that the idea would be to use a filled stone for that, and if not possible, a cultured stone. He did mention that the cultured stone would be, and let me pull that email up so I do not speak out of turn, but the cultured stone would be selected in such a way as to try to match this, which is the existing historic chimney, as much as possible. And then a third option would be a real stone, but the filled stone is a real stone, but a filled stone, then a cultured stone, and then a real stone that's not a filled stone would be the third option. And he's asking that all be considered by the commission for approval, then the cost analysis be weighed later on. But again, I would encourage the commission to comment on that when it makes a motion. Now, moving on to the size of the addition, as I mentioned previously, the guidelines recommend that additions not exceed more than 50% of the footprint of the house as it existed historically. What we define as historic is typically 50 years in age or older, because that is the federal standard by which something may be considered historic. So the footprint of the existing house is the footprint of the proposed addition is 1,333 square feet, or approximately 67% of the historic house. So the historic house, as we're talking about it today, would be the existing structure minus that rear screen porch they're wanting to remove, because it's not a historic screen porch. If it were, we would ask them to maintain it. So ultimately, the addition as proposed is 67% of the structure minus that rear screen porch that's currently there. And that exceeds the recommendations of the design guidelines by 17%. But I do want to note that the lot coverage is, which means anything under roof on the lot, is 17%, which is substantially lower than what the guidelines recommend to maintain as 35% or less. So I do have two motions for you today. The motion for partial demolition would be to approve with the conditions that the applicant photograph the rear screen porch satisfactorily inside and out prior to removal, and submit that to staff for commission records, and then seek a building permit to move forward with that demolition. As for the addition, because the size of it exceeds the recommendations of the design guidelines, it is recommended that the commission deny it. But if issued a COA, all new windows for the addition must have historic profile and dimension, and those specifications must be submitted to staff for review and approval prior to issuance of a building permit. Additional information on the foundation material would be something that I would recommend. I did get that additional information from Mr. Burke today in reference to that condition noted on your staff report, but I would recommend that if the commission entertains approving this, that they specify something in relation to the approvable foundation materials, whether it's board form concrete, parge coated CMU, what have you. In accordance with the guidelines, that chimney shape would need to change. I did relay information to you from the applicant on his justification for maintaining the chimney as proposed. I would ask the commission to comment on the material, whether or not that's appropriate for the cultured stone versus the filled stone. And then if also issued a COA, it would need to meet all the requirements of the Building and Neighborhood Services Department prior to issuance of a building permit. Thank you.
Is that it?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Binkley, welcome.
Thank you.
Would you like to make any comments?
I don't think so. I think everybody's seen it enough times, and last time it was a positive reaction, so.
I think the site visit was very helpful. Thank you. Okay, let's do this in two motions. One's on the demolition at first, and then we'll deal with the addition. So if somebody will make a motion, are there any citizens who wish to comment on the application? I think our audience is departing. Then I'll take a motion then
I'll
on the
move to
demolition.
approve the partial demolition.
Thank you, Mary. Is there a second?
I'll second.
I'll se-
I'm going to give this one to Susan. Susan, thank you. Okay, any discussion on the demolition? I think we know what's involved there. So then all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, demolition done. The next one then is on the addition. So let's have a motion on the on the addition.
I will move to approve the issuance of a certificate of appropriateness for the addition proposal with the conditions laid out by staff that are listed here, that the chimney shape needs to come back to staff for approval. And I
Okay,
would-
you're.
Oh, I might have.
You
can I-
need to say why, since you're going against the staff
The
recommendation.
reason is because the massing of the screen porch that is being removed, I think lets the actual addition being built fall within a reasonable proportion to the historic building. If you consider that part of what is standing is being torn down, and then also if you consider the size of the lot. So that is why I'm going against. But I want to make sure that these are read into my motion, what she has outlined.
Okay.
So to be clear, that's, you said the chimney shape, the windows?
The windows and I would also say, and you said the foundation material, that I even think with the chimney, that a mock-up of the material used be brought to staff for approval.
Can you
I'll
com-
second that, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Brian.
And I just want to be clear, the foundation materials,
You've got it outlined. It's the foundation materials, the chimney shape, portions, form, and materials used. And of course, I think the windows always come back to staff.
right.
But the difference was the mock-up. You said, Mary, a
The
mock-up come
mock-up,
to
that's the
staff.
only difference besides what she has outlined, is the mock-up of the chimney
Not just a
material.
picture.
Not just a picture, come back to staff, a sample.
Okay, thank you.
That, you got it all, Amanda?
I think so.
And Brian has seconded it, so. Okay, discussion. Susan?
I cannot support this. My concern is that the overage, 50% is what our guidelines say, and this is 17% over that. The thing about working with a log house is you have to be more cognizant of how much you add to the house, because you really want that log house to stand out. And I feel like that this does not respect the footprint of the house and the massing. Thank you.
Josh?
Yeah, help me understand what the rationale was for having it go so far beyond the 50%. And I was looking to see if, you know, by my calculations, if it was at all tied to having the screen porch that we've just authorized to be torn off. But it looks like it's even well beyond the 50% with that screen porch included. So I know we're not supposed to include that, and we haven't, but help me understand the rationale for submitting the plan and why we should approve that under the guidelines.
Well, I think originally we weren't sure if it was original to the house or not. And so that was part of the footprint. And I'm not positive on percentages exactly, but I don't think it did exceed the 50% if you included the screened-in porch, which is part of the footprint as it is now.
Okay. Well, and I'm looking at A2, which this may not be right, but it showed 2282 for the square footage, including the screen porch.
Yes.
Which half of that would be, 1141 roughly, if I've got my math right. So I think we're still in excess of it.
Slightly.
Yeah, by
And
about,
it's about 58% if you include the screen porch.
yeah. Okay.
Okay, any other comments?
I have a question. And Josh hinted at it. Why are we excluding the screened-in porch from the calculation again?
So the way that the guidelines read is that an addition should be no more than half the footprint of the original portion of the house. Now, in this case, they're electing to remove that. That's not always the case, however. So the rationale for the guideline is to allow the building to grow and expand over time, but manage that so that, for example, if someone were to have a 1,000 square foot house, that's a historic house, add a 500 square foot addition per guidelines, that 10 years from that is not a 750 foot addition to that. So it's trying to keep it in the addition in scale with the historic form, but we do acknowledge that things gain historic importance over time. So if someone has an addition to a house and it's at least 50 years in age, we count that toward the addable footprint.
And I probably should have clarified, so I apologize. So you guys made the determination that the screened-in porch was not part of the original building footprint?
That is my interpretation. Now, I don't know when it was added specifically, but it's not my estimation that it was original to the house. Now, if it's been there 50 years or more, we would consider that as part of that footprint, but that information was not shared with me by the applicant to make that association when determining the calculation. But like you said, it would have been a 58% addition if you did include that as part of the footprint. If it were historic, we'd ask for it to be preserved and maintained.
I'm having trouble supporting this because 17% is a really big percentage. If the screened-in area was included and it was only 8%, that to me is a more reasonable number. Unfortunately, I'm sitting here today having to exclude the screened-in porch. I'm not sure what the process would look like to possibly go back and analyze and reinsert that screened-in porch if possible. If you could do that, I could get more comfortable, but at 17%, I don't think I could support that today.
Okay, other comments?
Mr. Chair, did
Yeah.
Ms. Rose want comments on the material that's in the chimney versus flagstone, cut stone? Or is that part of the motion of staff approval?
So I did make a In the staff analysis and recommendation, I did ask that, you know, that the chimney be altered to be more consistent with the house. Now, Mr. Burke responded by providing his comments on why the chimney is designed the way it is, but then did comment more on the materials, suggesting that they would like to use a stone that is a filled stone, but like the option to use a cultured stone if cost analysis would render that to be more appropriate at the time they construct the house. So I do always recommend a real stone or a real stone veneer as opposed to a non-real stone on a historic structure. But I believe Ms. Pierce's motion is seeking a mock-up so that I can make a determination if that cultured stone has enough of a natural appearance to be acceptable. Unless you guys have a difference of opinion, that's my understanding of the motion.
And my experience is it generally doesn't.
Right.
Okay. Any other-
Yeah, I have
Josh?
one more. I'm going to go back to the well one more time, and I know that Mr. Burke isn't here, but I'm just trying to get an understanding of why it's been designed, and I completely understand why you want it designed to be as big as you do, but why it's been designed, whether it's 58%, which I think it sounds like it's not, but 67%, as opposed to the 50% mark. Is there any other justification for why we're being asked to go so far beyond the guidelines that helps mitigate that, or whatever the rationale is?
I guess it was just adding what we would like to add for our needs, for our growing family.
Sure. Okay.
What is the, inside the house now, what, bedrooms and all of that, what have you got in there now?
There's 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms.
Okay. And this change will give you what?
And this change will give us 4 bedrooms and 3.5 bathrooms. excuse
Okay.
me.
Plus the outside area.
Correct.
Okay.
I knew Miss Ewing that lived there, so I've been in the house. It's a small house.
Yeah.
On a very big lot.
Yes, I agree. Okay. Any other comments? We ready to vote? All right, then all in favor of the motion to approve, based on Mary's motion, and it's with all of the comments that Amanda has listed, if issued a COA, with the only change being that under B of that item, that a mock-up of the staff for the foundation material be provided.
And the chimney.
And the chimney.
Yes, sir. And the size of the chimney. She's written it in her report.
Okay.
It's outlined in the staff
C.
recommendations, B, C.
Yeah, I've got all that. I
okay.
didn't hear chimney when we were talking
Yes,
about
sir.
it before. Okay. Okay, so is everybody clear on all that? Then, all in favor of the motion to approve, please raise your hand. All in, isn't that interesting? Okay, all in,
In just a
Against.
moment, that's,
okay,
can
you
you
got
raise your hands
Ken,
again?
Mary, me, and Brian.
Okay.
All opposed, please raise your hand. So we're deadlocked here. So we need another motion,
Yes.
I believe. Right, counsel?
Yes.
I think you've corrected me on that before. Okay, we need another motion then. Anybody want to make another motion?
I move to defer to the next voting meeting.
Okay, got a motion to defer by Brian. Is there a second to that?
I'll
And-
second.
Susan? Any discussion on the motion to defer to the next voting meeting, which would be July?
So can we get the applicants, or the owner, rather, some information on what to?
I'm sorry, I didn't,
Would you elaborate, please, on the deferral and give the applicant some direction on what to provide additionally for you?
anybody want to say, I would say that we want to look at ways that we can cut the 67% overage down to a more reasonable number.
It's not 67 overage, is it?
Yes.
I thought it was 17.
No, it's
It's-
60%, it's
You're right.
67% greater. It's 17 percentage points
Greater,
over.
yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, thank you.
17%. Reduce that amount is,
Yes.
is, I think, the goal here, to try to reduce that amount. What?
And to invite the applicant back to DRC.
Yeah, that would be fine. We've just, I mean, that is available, I guess, for the next week, right, Amanda?
Yes, it can be Monday.
Okay, there's a motion to defer then by Brian and second by Susan. Any other conversation on that? Then all in favor of that motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Okay.
You're-
No, I just, there's nobody, nobody opposing. All right.
Okay, well, at this point, Mrs. Binkley, I can talk to Mr. Burke. I would like to. All right, thank you.
Okay. Next item is consideration of new construction at 125 Splendor Ridge. Chad Gore. Okay, Amanda.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. I am pulling up that application now. So the applicant is seeking a certificate of appropriateness for the construction of a new home at the property at Lot 5. Lot 5 is shown here on the screen. It's to the right as you enter the subdivision. This is located behind historic Riverview subdivision on Franklin Road. The applicant did appear before the Design Review Committee to discuss his proposal at the May meeting. So there is a preliminary COA that was issued for this development that set the expectations for maximum height and scale. So that, I always include that in the staff report for your review and background understanding. The applicant's proposing the construction of a two-story cross gable residence with a minimal classical revival detailing at this location. I'm going to go ahead and skip to the renderings here. Mr. Gore is great about providing renderings for you to experience the volume of the home. It is a recessed single bay entrance, as you can see from the front here. A single-story form is situated to the right of the porch, designed to read as a porch area that's been enclosed. A small terrace is situated in front of the single-story form that creates a porch. It's just a non-covered porch in front of it. The entitlements have been set with the development for the setbacks, so it is a 15-foot side yard or front yard setback, 5 on the sides and 15 at the rear. A 2-bay garage is proposed on this structure. As you can see here, it is situated approximately 36 feet back from the front facade. And I'm calling the front facade exactly that, the front facade. Usually I have to clarify because someone has a porch in front, but this is a non-covered porch. So it's the front facade, non-inclusive of this terrace here. The guidelines do recommend reinforcement and maintenance of existing setbacks. This property, as I said, is a platted subdivision and does acknowledge and respect the setbacks as defined. The applicant did provide this conceptual streetscape view in order to provide information on the building's placement and context, as well as the topographical changes from street view, or street grade rather, to the proposed grade level. So the grade difference between the area from the curb to the building's finished floor elevation equates to approximately 4 feet 10 inches. And the applicant has provided this rendering to demonstrate the proposed use of, tiered concrete risers, landscaping that helps achieve a softer grade transition from the street to the building floor. As far as scale, the building is scaled at 2 stories, which is appropriate for this district. It's also consistent with that preliminary COA I mentioned. The use of the single-story element to the right side of the porch also softens the perceived massing and scale of the building. The guidelines do mention, however, that in areas where historic garages are generally detached, that new garages should appear to be detached, but that attached garages should be designed in such a way that they are located at traditional locations behind the rear plane of the main form of the house or otherwise not visible from the street. In previous applications, the applicant has proposed to have the garage attached but placed it an area that's largely behind the entire form of the house, the main form, definitely. In this case, the applicant has requested to kind of modify and provide some variety to the streetscape by having a form that's a little closer to the street. The form here is approximately 36 feet from that front facade as a 1.5-story garage form. While the applicant did incorporate some roofline changes to lessen the perceived connection between this garage and the main form, which was recommended by the Design Review Committee. This configuration does not mitigate that massing created by the garage, as well as the structures previously approved at this development. So it does not meet the spirit of the guideline for the placement of the garage. The form is less traditional in appearance, being closer to the street than that recommended by the guidelines. As far as height, the overall height of the building at 36 feet, not inches, is consistent with the development's preliminary COA. The materials are proposed to be a brick, cementitious lap siding, a smooth cementitious panel at certain locations, wood or 5-pon railing, and asphalt shingle roofing with metal roofing at this single-story element, all of which are appropriate. Window specifications haven't been provided here, but if they are consistent with what has been submitted previously for the development, they are appropriate. Building coverage is at 39.7%, which is not consistent with the guidelines. The guidelines do recommend that maximum building coverage not exceed 35% in specified residential districts, including this one. So with that, it is recommended that the commission deny the proposed new construction as it exceeds the lot coverage recommendation by 4.7%, and that the placement of the attached garage is not entirely consistent with the recommendations of the guidelines. If issued a COA, the windows must be submitted to staff for review and approval prior to issuance of a building permit, and the application must meet all other requirements of the city prior to issuance of a building permit. Thank you.
Chad, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Amanda.
Thank
Good
you.
evening, commissioners. Chad Gore, architect, representing the applicant, Mike Ford Builders. I know you're exhausted, so I'll make it brief, but I do want to at least take a moment to address the things that staff has issued in the report and their recommendation for denial. I'll start with the lot coverage. I've included some materials in the packet that haven't been in there before. This is not necessarily new information, but stuff that was talked about 6 months ago. I know we have some new faces on the commission, so I wanted to make sure that we took a moment and addressed these things that were talked about a while ago prior to the previous approvals on the, I think, 6 now that are approved on this development. I'll take them in order, maybe the pages. Will you go back to page 1?
Absolutely.
1, I'm going to call them my mitigating factors. 1 being that we're talking about a development as a whole here, not necessarily a single infill structure on a historic street. I think, in my opinion, that allows you some flexibility. And this is just a depiction of that as a development. So the second page shows exactly where we are. We have kind of a pocket, is a word we use many times, a pocket of historic overlay that's accessed through a non-contributing neighborhood, Harpeth Meadows. Though we are, of course, nearby downtown and the Franklin corridor, this kind of sets itself up as a pocket unto itself. Third page, please. This one is probably a new illustration you guys haven't seen, but it's some figures we've shared before. I thought this maybe made it even clearer than maybe it was previously. So we have 19 lots. 2 of them are really easy to deal with in terms of lot coverage. The other 17, as they were created, are very narrow, very deep, and sort of limit how many ways you can skin the cat, excuse me, in terms of configuring a house on the lot. So if I assumed that those 17 lots all were filled to a 40% coverage, I'm going to cut to the chase, you'd end up with about a 13% coverage over the entire site. I'm happy to sort of explain that some more if we need to when we get to the end of the presentation. But if you look at the site as a whole, not including the road, not including the site for Riverview, the building coverage over the entire site is about 13%.
Just the green area, right?
That's right. Just the green area is about 500,000 square feet, I believe. And if you put a 40% coverage house on 17 out of the 19 lots, you get to about 13% coverage of the entire site. And lastly, and I think that's the big one in my mind. But lastly, maybe the next page works out for this. Yes, generally the garages are all set back, not attached to the side of the front mass of the house. So there's generally 22, 23 feet between houses. So the massing of the house is set up in the lot's depth so that the amount of room that the house takes up on the lot is not necessarily apparent from the street view. It's narrower and doesn't, the houses aren't crammed together. We don't have them 10 feet apart. I guess secondly, I'll address the garage massing. That is something that we talked about in the last DRC. And as we got down to some specific, there's one in here, man, I think it's page 7.
Yes.
Yeah. And I'm standing here now wishing I'd included kind of before and after, but we did some deliberate things based on some really good feedback that you guys gave to me. So we're able to kind of carve out a little niche between the garage mass itself and the main house, letter A there. Lowered the windows that are above the garage doors to help that feel like a different chapter in the story of the house, if you will. And then substantially lowered the roof that is connecting the garage piece to the main house. It used to be well above the forward-facing gable of the garage, and I think that sort of made it feel like it was just, more of the upper story of the house. But I think lowering it below the ridge of the garage gable really did the most help in making this feel like it was a semi-detached garage, I'll use that term. I think it's an important point to make probably at this stage that, can we go back to page 3?
Sure.
As I was saying, there's only so many ways we can skin this cat. I think it's important to look for other ways. I think it's better if we can find ways for the back half of these houses not to all end up being exactly the same. And even though, the floor plans themselves have been a little bit different, all 4, let's see, you've approved 6 now. 4 of those were on exactly the same size lots, and all 4 of those have substantially the same rear half massing, because it works really well.
This is lot 5, correct?
That's right. And so the ones you've approved are the actual footprints. The rest of them are just guesses. But yeah, you can see on lot 5 how there's more, it's a different massing on the back half of the house. It does bring the garage a little bit closer, but I'm hoping we've created the illusion of a semi-detached garage. But as I was saying, I think it's important that we find other ways to rearrange the massing to keep from having too uniform a series of designs along this street. That may be all I have, and I'll certainly open myself up to questions.
Okay. Any citizens wish to comment on the application? Otherwise, we'll take a motion from the commission.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
I move to approve the proposed new construction with the stipulations that are listed.
All right, there's a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Nick. All right, discussion. Ms. Besser?
I think you've done a fine job designing these houses, Mr. Gore. As I've done on the previous ones, I will not be able to support it because of the overage. And I think that what concerns me is we're setting a precedent here, and I realize that there is a lot of land, and you've made a really good case for that. But I still feel like that, you know, that we're going to be requested to look at these overages and have to weigh in on them, and that just makes me uncomfortable. Thank you.
All right,
Mr.
Ken?
Chair, I just want to say the reason that I departed from the staff recommendation is because it's consistent with what we have approved for this development previously.
Thank you, I forgot to.
Yeah, it's okay, and I think that the change in materials from the main house to the garage helps to define it separately.
Any other comments? All right, we're ready to vote. Just be a call for a show of hands. All in favor then of the motion, please raise your hand. And any opposed? Ms. Besser. All right, thank you. Next one. That'll be number 131 Splendor Ridge.
Number 8. So the applicant is requesting a COA for new construction on this site. While I pull it up, I will just mention that, you know, this site is has many of the same considerations as the last item. This one. In terms of the preliminary COA that defines, you know, maximum scale and height and variety of houses up and down the street. The applicant here is proposing a, am I looking at the right one? It's about to read the previous one. It's like, this is not a two-story classical revival. This is a 1.5-story cross-gabled residence with a Tudor flavor here, a Tudor revival detailing. It features a single bay recessed entrance and a single bay porch that's covered by a pergola. And the attached garage is at the rear of the driveway, similar to what has been approved previously. You can see that here in this rendering. The two-level porch, of course, is at the rear of the elevation, as we've seen on the other applications as well. The setbacks are meeting the plat for the development. The streetscape is conceptualized. This is one of the properties where the grade's evening out, so you see that there isn't as substantial of a foundation height on this particular one as some of the others you've seen. But did I get that right?
Yeah, they're on their way down.
Yeah. So the curb to FFV, I've listed here as 5 feet 7 inches difference.
That's about right.
That is about right? Okay, I wanted to make sure because it looks kind of low on this rendering here.
Oh, the rendering, you know.
The applicants provided this rendering to show that they're using tiered concrete risers and landscaping to help soften the appearance of that change. And again, I did want to note that there were some retaining walls proposed by the applicant, but those just weren't feasible with some easements required for utilities at this location. So that is why this is moved forward without that. The scale and height are appropriate to the district and meet the preliminary COA approval. This height is proposed at approximately 38 feet. The garage here is proposed to be sort of a semi-detached. It is at the rear and right side of the principal structure, oriented toward the street at the end of the driveway. So it does have an appearance, like you can see from this rendering, of being like a peekaboo kind of a, is it or is it not attached to the physical form. The materials are proposed to be brick, cementitious lap siding, smooth cementitious panels in those gabled areas, an iron railing at the front porch and a wood railing at the rear, and asphalt shingle roofing. The bracketed pergola is proposed to be mounted over the garage doors. So I'm going to go ahead and skip to the elevation so you can see that. So that bracketed pergola is over the garage doors. And the reason for that is the applicant has taken very seriously the comments that have been provided about eliminating shed awnings over infill garage doors. And so this is a way to kind of break up that massing and provide some variety up and down the street while honoring that recommendation. The proportion and rhythm of the openings are all consistent with the guidelines. I did want to state that examples of comparable Tudor-inspired shutters have been included for the commission's consideration. So that is a single page in the packet with some shutters I believe the applicants used on different projects in the past. That was a request from the DRC to bring that information. So while the design meets all the intent of the guidelines, the coverage does exceed by 4.5%. This is at a 39.5% coverage. So it is recommended that the commission deny based on that. But if issued a COA, the windows do need to be approved by staff, and it must meet all the other requirements of the city prior to issuance of a building permit. Thank you.
Thanks. Chad?
Thank you, Amanda. I have nothing further. Well, I would submit the same discussion points about lot coverage as we did on the last item. Other than that, I have nothing else.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Commissioner, need a motion. You're on a roll.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve based on the reasoning I provided previously.
All right. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Brian.
With staff comments, right?
Yeah, right.
Right.
Could I ask a question?
Yes, ma'am.
On the left elevation, it just looks like the first portion of the house just rose into the back. And is there a way where the roof line comes down on the front portion to do something to provide a break there? It may be even a gutter, but something.
Sure, yeah, absolutely can do a downspout there. Where the back slope of the main mass of the roof, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I,
Yeah.
I'll offer that as an amendment.
Wait a minute. All right, point us to the right page.
Okay, it's on the A5.
A5, okay.
Okay, if you go to the front porch of the house.
All right, got it.
You look at the double windows upstairs.
Right.
And where the roof comes down, it looks like it just grows in to the rest of the house. So if that were broken with a downspout.
Right.
And just in case it's not clear, there is an offset in the plan. The second story is set back
Yeah,
a little bit.
yeah.
Okay.
Yes. So add a downspout at the bottom of that gable form to extend out to break that massing.
If someone seconds it, that's my amendment.
I'll second.
Okay.
But is there a break in the actual, it insets there?
This
correct?
insets,
Yeah.
the top does,
Yeah,
but not
right.
there.
Right.
Okay.
There was a second? Okay, thank you.
Yep.
It's an easy fix. It could be the computer.
All right, add downspout, left elevation, give me some verbiage here to describe the point.
I'm writing down that the amendment request is to add a downspout at the end of the gable eave on the left elevation, which is at page A5.
That's correct.
Say that again.
To add a downspout
Right, I
at
got
the
it.
end of the gable.
Yeah, at the end of the, that's what I'm looking for, okay. All right, add downspout end of gable on A5. Mary made it, the amendment, and Brian seconded. All right, any more discussion on that amendment? Then, all in favor of that amendment, please say aye. Aye. Okay, that passes. So we're back to the original motion. Is there any more discussion on the original motion as amended? Ready to vote then? Then let's do motion as amended. Please raise your hand. And opposed? One opposed. Ms. Besser opposed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chad. My computer is passing away, so I am getting a charger. So if it does go off, then we'll remediate that shortly.
Okay, we're to the last item. Consideration of alteration porch walk-up construction at 202 3rd Avenue North.
All right, so last but not least, the applicant is requesting a certificate of appropriateness for the construction of an accessible walkway. The building's being converted to a non-residential use, and it requires an accessible access into the building. The applicant's client is seeking to use the front entrance as the accessible access. I'm going to zoom in a little bit for you. In the audience, but it'll help Mr. Akers here be able to see as we go along. Thank you. So as you can see, what you're seeing on the bottom of the cross section here is that the front of the house faces 3rd Avenue, which is on the left side of the screen, and the access to the building for accessibility as proposed by the applicant is at the rear of the building, at the front of the building, and that the proposed accessible parking is at the rear of the building inside that carport that you see at the far right. So the applicant's proposing to get folks from the carport to the front porch in an accessible way. And as you know, the front porch is raised, and so there needs to be some sort of a change in grade to accommodate that. In speaking with the owner of the property previously, he had asked about adding a ramp to the front of the house, accessible from the Church Street side. I did recommend against that, and so he spoke with the applicant and proposed this solution. So this solution, as proposed, would be adding a ramped sidewalk. So, and I say ramped sidewalk because here at the front porch, please bear with me. You can see the front porch is off the ground. There is a change in grade that would have an exposed concrete sidewalk that looks like it's about 2 feet exposed from the cross section, and it would slowly slope down to be even with the carport here. And it has a slope that's 1/12. So what that means is that it's not steep enough to require a handrail. So this can be achieved without a handrail. And the proposed solution would be to use, instead of a wooden deck type of ramp, which is typical of what we see, to use concrete and have an aggregate side on it that's exposed, because the intent of the applicant is to face this side with aggregate to match the sidewalk of the building as it runs from the front porch to 3rd Avenue here. Now, I did ask for the applicant to provide this cross-section and to provide some information about how this proposed sidewalk parallels with the public sidewalk. So you can see from this page that the public sidewalk is located down here, where it says Franklin sidewalk. The proposed sidewalk, this is the porch. They want to level that out a little bit. I said 112, I meant 120, excuse me. Have a 120 slope, have it level here, and then go down. This is about, ranges from 5'4" to 5'10" from the existing sidewalk. And then would tie back into the public sidewalk back here and tie into the carport here. It's 4 feet wide at this location. I believe it's 4 feet wide everywhere, as that's the ADA requirement to be at least 4 feet wide. The applicant is seeking to be sensitive to the site and setting by adding something that wouldn't require a rail to draw a lot of attention to it. Now, the guidelines do recognize that Accessibility is important. They do recommend that one locate ramps or wheelchair lifts on rear or secondary elevations where they're not readily visible from the street. And that one considers using a temporary or a portable ramp rather than a more permanent structure. Ramps and lifts should be designed to be reversible and have minimal impact. That guidelines also state that new sidewalks and walkways should follow historic alignment, configuration, and width and materials. So given the sensitivity to being allowing for accessibility and weighing that with the guidelines, this is a tough application. It is a corner lot with a lot of visibility, but the proposal does not meet the intent of the guidelines. The corner lot being highly visible and the use of a permanent material such as a concrete sidewalk to run parallel to the public sidewalk at a distance of 5 to 6 feet away is not a historic alignment or configuration. It's very atypical. So permanent landscaping could be used to help mitigate the non-historic appearance of the sidewalk, but rather, I would recommend that the commission defer review to encourage the applicant to continue to peruse alternatives that would allow for access from the rear, or alternatively, using a temporary ramp or lift. I did ask about potential to add access from this side so that the ramp could be hidden from street view more because it would be between the houses. I'd love the applicant to comment on that if that's a possibility, but overall, it would be recommended the applicant attend an upcoming DRC to discuss some options to allow for accessibility, because it is a requirement and a need and something that the guidelines and the commission do want to support, but this configuration may not be the best in meeting the overall intent of the guidelines. If issued a COA, however, the application would need to meet all the requirements of the Building and Neighborhood Services Department for a revised building permit. They do have one currently, but the accessibility is something they would like to change on this proposal versus the one that they have brought forward for permitting. Thank you.
Okay, would the applicant like to comment on this application?
Yes, thank you. My name's Steve Akers. I'm with Integris Architecture. We're an architecture firm here in Franklin. And I'm here tonight to represent Mr. Keith Baker. He's our client, owner of this project. First of all, I want to thank the commission for hearing us tonight. Also want to respectfully recognize staff's recommendation and thank Amanda for working with us to date on this project. We would like that the commission would consider approval of this project tonight with an additional item that we don't have proposed in what's before you. Amanda did mention it to some degree that we would like to propose a low shrubbery, evergreen type landscaping along the edge of this concrete sidewalk. As Amanda described, it's along the length of it, there's an ever increasing edge that would be exposed as someone is walking down the sidewalk or driving down the road. And it's approximately where grade meets the top of that sidewalk, or grade 2 sidewalk at the highest point, is about 17 inches. And then that's an ever decreasing exposure of the side of that sidewalk as you head towards the handicap parking, which is in the carport. So we would like to propose that there's evergreen landscaping all along that edge to lower that impact, the visual impact of that sidewalk. And to respond to Amanda's comment about the possibility of taking the sidewalk around the backside, or if we're talking about this plan view, it would be the top, or plan north, the top side, yes, along there. The difficulty there is it's a very narrow dimension between the house and the edge of property. And there are existing elements back there, HVAC units, that a displacement would most likely cause other issues. So that really negates the ability to run the sidewalk along that, which even if we could, we would most likely have to introduce either another entrance or bring the sidewalk all the way around, thereby increasing the distance between the accessible parking space and the front door. Just a little additional note is, as a part of this new slope sidewalk, and Amanda was correct, we specifically designed it at a 1 in 20, which keeps us from having to provide a hand railing all the way down. If it was a typical 1 in 12, you'd have to have a handrail along the sidewalk, which would clearly have more of a visual impact of this element added to the site. So we do have a 1 in 20. That's why we're calling it a slope sidewalk. And it fortunately collects a mid-entrance along the length of the Bridge Street elevation. Therefore, we do not, and it actually helps the elevation condition from that door to grade so that we don't even have to have handrails for that particular entry either. So it eliminates that particular need. So having said that, we would like for the commission to consider approval based on that additional element that, like I said, you don't have before you right now, which is additional landscaping for screening.
Okay, great, thanks. All right, there's no citizens here to comment, so, in the audience anyway, so I'll just look to the commission for a motion then.
I'll make a motion.
All right, Susan, thank you.
I recommend that the Historic Zoning Commission defer review of the proposed ramp sidewalk addition with the following comments by the staff.
All right, defer to July meeting, next voting meeting.
Next voting meeting in July.
Is there a second to that?
I'll second.
Just to clarify, the next voting meeting would be on Monday, July 12th.
Okay, Monday, July 12th, fine, we'll be specific.
And also invite the applicant to the design review.
Yes. Are you seconding the motion, Mary, too?
Yes.
Thank you. That's fine. Let me just ask, this is a dumb question, but it's late. So I'll ask it anyway. Is there not can you not use the public sidewalk for a portion of this?
No, unfortunately.
That's not.
Unfortunately not. It's because of the angles. The nice thing about this, as it goes from the carport up to the porch, the grade is an increasing grade. It actually drops as you go away from the house.
Yeah, I'm familiar with the site.
Yeah. So you really don't get an advantage by trying to use the public sidewalk.
Okay, it just seems like this is a very complicated solution.
It's a tough little
It's
spot.
it's tough, okay.
I also have another question to that. You discussed possibly having the sidewalk in the back. I don't see an entrance door on the backside, or?
There's not one.
There's not?
No. So
Okay.
it would have to be an added feature, which would also require a certificate of appropriateness to do anything like that.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, this picture
Yeah.
tells a lot right here.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, Ken.
The question I've got for the applicant is, so you're showing a concrete landing that is being faced with brick to match the house. Would it not be possible, of course, it is a constant slope, you're 18 inches out of grade, the highest point, I would think you would need something to keep somebody from rolling off this thing.
Yeah,
So-
there is some further detailing that would occur past this point, which would be part of the construction documentation of that sidewalk, that would provide that curbing. It wouldn't provide any additional visual to the edge, but, to the vertical edge.
Like a curve on
A very small curb, yeah,
Right.
very small curb.
What I was going to say, though, is since you're doing a brick veneer at the landing, was there a potential to do one along the face of this ramp and maybe raise that brick a little bit to create that curb that we're talking about you're going to need?
We could do that, absolutely. If you did what would be the convention, or what we see in place here, which would be a roll-lock, that type of edging, to use that to create the curb would, most likely, it would increase the width of that ramp slightly. Not by much, but it would increase the width a little bit to make sure that you've got the dimensions in between the raised brick would be the appropriate width for the sidewalk.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking about this long slope that you've got, and how do
Yeah.
you work your coursing out with that? That would,
Yeah, and that's why we're suggesting that it's, instead of trying to make that edge a different look, is to use screening.
Mr. Chair, isn't this
Okay.
what design?
Yeah, that's it, we're
review-
getting into design review. That's why we do this Monday. And Steve, I suggest that you make some pictures shooting from the lot, not, you're across the street in this one. Shoot it from the lot back up toward Third Avenue.
Yeah, the one that has the ramp and railings.
Yeah, this one right here, yeah. Shoot it from the back here up there
Oh,
so we
I get
kind
you.
of get a better
Sure.
picture of the actual terrain there.
Okay, yeah, we will.
And, all right, we need a vote on the motion to defer. Then all in favor of the motion to defer to the next July the 12th meeting, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? We're done.
Okay, and just for Mr. Akers' knowledge, the Design Review Committee meeting's Monday at 4 o'clock. I will not have you sit 3 hours before your item. And we'll have it closer to the beginning of the agenda. But essentially, it is a non-binding discussion meeting at which you can provide, any new information you'd like to share, or I can simply provide this, and then they'll be able to brainstorm with you and give you some feedback on how to move forward with a application in the future.
Is there a potential for this commission to approve?
No.
Okay, not based
No,
on that?
the DRC is not a voting body. It's simply a discussion body.
Okay. Any other business? Otherwise, I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Nick. Is there a second?
Second.
Kathy did.
Kathy,
Good.
oh, good.
I thought I heard your voice.
She wants to stay.
All right, we'll give it to you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The motion to become a little.